Hello and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. If I can get my graphics right, how is it going today? My name is Brandon Kane, and I do thank you for tuning on in today. Wonderful, nice little Wednesday afternoon. We got the sun shining out here over on the east side. It's been nice past week. Going out on walks, it feels like almost the middle of summer. But I hope you guys are doing well out there today. We've got a little bit of Seahawks news to talk a little bit about. Some more signings. The Hawks remain active, value signing out there in free agency. No big contracts, but a whole lot of little ones being handed out all across the board here, which is interesting to see. We've got also, I think now as we're through the few weeks of free agency with where the cap is kind of sitting at and just kind of seeing what they're doing, I think the Seattle Seahawks are pretty much by and large at this point just about done. There might be a few more of these signings they make where these guys have a bit of a chance to make the roster, but it's a bit of hit and miss on that. You're not really, I don't think at this point, going to see them take any kind of other big monster swings. But with the couple weeks of free agency we have, there's a few different things that have really now, I think, become very clear about what's coming up in the foreseeable future in this process. They've kind of shown their hand just a little bit here, not only in regards to the draft, but also in regards to the 2025 season. And of course, here now with the end of this free agent period a bit, we've got a little more clear idea, I think, of potentially who the players are that are going to then land potentially to Seattle now in the upcoming draft, especially in the first round, because I know that that's something that many people are very, very interested in. So a lot to kind of pick out of this free agent spot. First, let's just start out with the signings kind of in total. You've got Leonard Williams, the big signing, Noah Fant, though you gave it the 3-year, $64 million deal to, of course, Leonard. Noah Fant, the second biggest deal with the 2-year, $21 million. We've got George Fant coming back, swing tackle / tight end, Jerome Baker to be, I believe, your starting middle linebacker, Tyrell Dodson to be your starting, essentially, will linebacker. Noah Fant on a 2-year, or I already said Noah, the Fant one. Kavon Wallace that they just re-signed today, and Jonathan Hankins, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in a second here. But then you've got Pharaoh Brown, tight end, Rashawn Jenkins, Nick Harris, backup center, Artie Burns, cornerback, Traymoon Untrum, an offensive lineman they brought in. Of course, they brought back Darrell Taylor and Michael Jackson. So those are kind of the collective of all the deals. A lot of 1-year contracts. Only Fant, your tight end, and Leonard Williams being the multi-year deals that you're looking to give out. We will find out what we potentially give. Okay, Rashawn Jenkins got a 2-year deal too, but there is a very easy out for Seattle after 1 year in that deal. So not a lot of multi-year deals out. I think a lot of that was to preserve out the cap situation for next season, but with the 2 signings that they just recently made, I think the Artrum lineman is a guy that's just going to have a bit of a hard time potentially even kind of landing his way onto this team in the long-term future. But the other 2 guys could be interesting. In regards to Jonathan Hankins, he is a guy that has had a long NFL career. He's a guy for a lot of years. I could never seem to get the difference between him and Snacks Harrison. I always was getting those 2 guys for whatever reason, I could not get around it. He was a guy that was really known like Snacks. I think this was part of it, that they were really big. You know, they're listed, like in his case, at 320. It's like, yeah, right. You know, in your bra, you know, it's like he's like he's probably 340, 350 easily out there. He's a very big man, but he's been a guy that has been that one tech throughout his career that's been usually pretty solid in that role. That's in a lot of times where he's been kind of outfitted. He'll give you a little bit of pass rush off the one tech, just got 3 sacks last year. He gives you just a tiny bit. But what does stand out, of course, is you can look at the PFF scores here over my shoulder, but also just where his career's at and kind of how much he has played going back to 2013. You know, the engine's probably starting to wear down on this particular car right now, I would say. It would seem like that on the outside looking in. From his score standpoint, you can see that they've gone down incrementally, just year by year by year by year by year. Last season, he got a high ankle sprain in about mid-December, so you know probably hard to give him much of a hard time beyond anything at that point, though he tried to come back for the playoff game. You know, those high ankle sprains, they take an off season basically. You know, those guys do come back, but it used to be called a broken leg. Now it's called a sprain, and it just is hard to bounce back from that one. If it's broke, it's broke. It's fractured, it's fractured. So he was able to give some pass rush last year on a smaller number of snaps than normal. Maybe he's starting to round that into his game a little bit more than he has in the past, but stopping the run has also kind of gone backwards as well in recent years with him. Now we'll trust our coach Blimey right here. We'll trust our new defensive coordinator here, having had the opportunity to recently coach Hankins there in Dallas. And I'm sure he was a big part of the consultation on this, being, hey, what did you see from last year? Does he have anything left? Is there something there? And so he did give his sign off. This is a little bit like any kind of deals you look at with guys that have the connection to Mike McDonald or Ben Grub. Coaches are going to go to bat for guys, but also coaches aren't going to go to bat for guys that are going to get them fired by, just them having their back. They're going to go for the bat for guys that they truly believe and have that insider knowledge about whether or not they can be good players, useful players, still have something left to give. This is going to be a big contract that you gave Mr. Hankins. He now gives you 3 nose tackles on the team. You've got Jaron Reed, you've got Cam Young, you've got Hankins. So if Cam Young doesn't develop further, here comes Hankins as the backup behind him to fill back in there, and Seattle's not left just hoping Cam Young's development can come forward. Jaron Reed, I think, can give you some solid snaps, albeit that you want to reduce down what he did last year into more of a rotational role, a true rotational role if you can. And so this also does mean, of course, because if you'd walked into this draft and had a need for that one extra nose tackle because you weren't sure about what you had in Cam Young, you might have been drawn over to that need-based state at some point in this draft saying, well, we got to go get that defensive tackle. Got to get that, where Jaron's old. Cam may not make it. Got to find something there. So now at least you've given yourself a little bit of insurance for that on that other side of it. The other guy that I think is going to end up getting a 1-year deal, we don't know the terms on either of these 2 deals as of yet, is going to be Kavon Wallace. He was originally selected in the 4th round by the Eagles about 4 years ago. I'm showing a little bit of the splits in his grade last season because he spent the year between 2 different teams. He wasn't just on one, but he has, with being with the Eagles the first time, that split safety familiarity. He'll be a fit for this scheme and understanding of what he needs to do within it. But he never really took off with the Eagles necessarily. The Eagles, as you can see by letting him out on his rookie contract after 3 years, I think in moving on to guys like Sidney Brown is a guy that they know. Well, he's kind of more of a pure free safety, I'd say. He can do the split safety stuff, but he's more free safety than strong safety. He is got the guy that's going to come in here and compete at the free safety role, I'd say, more than anything else. The place I think Seattle's looking at on the upside front of him here that they may like is there was a distinct difference last year in how he played from when he first started out the year with the Cardinals to when he was moved just before the deadline. Or it might have been even released. I can't remember on that one, but I believe it was a trade to the Tennessee Titans at that time where he really did finish off the year pretty strongly with them. And it's you can see here just over my shoulder, there's a very big difference between his performance scores from his time there with AZ to his time with Tennessee. But hey, you get trapped in Arizona, it's hard to play good, right? Not too many men are going to make it out there. I kid, but he's an interesting kid in the mix here. You throw him in there with Julian Love, you let them fight it out, you give yourself a little bit of depth. I know a lot of you like Jarek Reed and his potential that he can provide, but he is coming off the ACL. May not be ready next year. And much like the Hankins thing here, now you got to go into this draft not really pulled, I think, in much the least to have to go to safety. Do I think that they're going to take a long look at safety and they would surprise me in the least if they took one high in this draft? No, it would not. But they're not driven to have to do it. That's really the key of these 2 signings and what they do. They sort of cap off this free agency period as you look at this roster and that, okay, you don't give out any big contracts, but you give out a lot of these little ones of guys that can play in this league, who can play reasonably well. They're not going to give you the star power or the high impact play, but they can hold their water out there. And that does mean that you have these roster spots filled out in that way to where now when you look towards kind of pivoting into this draft, you're not driven towards needing to have to go towards that need state at any really given point. Yes, guard needs to still be addressed. That's the one elephant in the room that we could certainly say they're going to at some point need to probably double dip into this draft at guard somewhere. You can't just go, well, we're good here, let's roll. That's not going to be the case at all. That needs to be, certainly aided out. And a lot of these are also 1-year contracts. So, you're going to stand to be able to draft at every one of these positions in many respects. but you're going to do it from that value-based point where you're not driving to the need. You're driving because that guy's the top guy on your board. You're like, oh yeah, well, we'll need a safety in a year. Oh yeah, we'll need a middle linebacker in a year. That's where you're talking about. This is some base, I think, root philosophy and the differences between what builds a great draft and what causes a draft failure to come about, especially looking in recent Seahawks history from the last 2 years versus, let's say, the prior 5 years in drafting history beyond that. I did run a little bit of a mock draft here after kind of some of the signings here today. I won't run you guys through the mock draft simulator when I do this, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of the update. I moved around all over the place, up, down, inside out. I was able to get a future second round pick and moved back a bunch. I ended up wanted to do a little bit of a different draft on this one. I ended up not picking until about the second round because I was trading back and around so much. But we got Penix, Cooper Bebe, Junior Colson, Zach Zinter. So I took care of the offensive line, got your guys quarterback of the future. So some of those folks in the chat who are looking for that, you got that. For me, Penix in the second round isn't a bad way to go at that point. Junior Colson gives you your middle linebacker of the future. I also went back, kind of made a University of Washington heavy draft. I thought, why not? We're deep into the value as good as I got to the depths of the draft, getting Edefon Ulofoso and the Hawks needing a fourth running back on this roster, Dylan Johnson, who wasn't able to test well because of his own injury late into the season. I also took A.J. Barner, really nice blocking tight end out of Michigan, just because I thought, again, the value was really good there with that one. But I'm sure, like all of you, running a lot of different mock drafts. One thing I wanted to also show you guys was, I think, a little bit of a firmer, clearer landscape just before we get to 2025. I wanted to show a little bit of where I think right now the situation's going here a bit in the first round, okay? Because teams have started to sign their players. They've started to put their rosters and filled their stuff out. You're getting a little bit of hearing and feeling a little bit about which players are getting targeted by what teams. And certainly there's a lot of smoke. We're still well over a month out of the draft. A lot can change inside this time. But just where it sits right now, I think is kind of interesting to look at. It gives us a little bit of an idea of what we might be able to expect to be available to the Hawks when we come down picking down the line. Now, this is also an extreme amount of a little bit of guesswork. I'll own that part. But I think that this is something, again, many of you guys are doing out there in your own way in looking at what's going on right now, what's what. And so let's talk about this. We've got the Chicago Bears off the top taking Caleb Williams at this point. All but certain, all but guaranteed. Now, Washington, New England, is it Drake May? Is it Jaden Daniels? It doesn't really matter for the purposes of our exercise here. May, Daniels, whoever goes in those two spots, we probably see 3 quarterbacks taken in the first 3 picks. Hard not to see the Cardinals eventually landing up on Marvin Harrison Jr. If somebody wants to trade up to them, I'm sure they would be listening and would certainly trade back, because they could still go get a great receiver, if not him. And certainly from what we're hearing a lot from, at the very least with Neighbors, is that he seems to have narrowed the gap between him and Harrison. Some reported boards even having Neighbors over the top of Harrison Jr. I'm not so sure how much I really buy that. But let's just go again, for the sake of the argument, with Marvin Harrison Jr. going to Arizona. This leaves us then with the Chargers. And by the looks of things, it would seem to me like the Chargers are standing in a position at this point where they're going to look to try to accumulate maybe a little bit extra picks. It's the first season there with Harbaugh. They're sitting in a bit of a pole position in this draft, in that J.J. McCarthy's stock is going up, and you've got a couple of hot-to-trot teams just behind them. It seems like a trade is probably going to happen, and it would almost seem like it might happen because you have the Giants and Vikings both kind of competing to go up there and potentially go get J.J. McCarthy. So I have, in this scenario, the Chargers having Minnesota move up with them in the draft here. Minnesota takes J.J. McCarthy. The Chargers only fall back to 11 at that point, still picking up very high in this draft. But the Vikings get a replacement then for Kirk Cousins. They jump in front of the Giants to do so. The Giants sit there and they curse through their whole pick. They don't even listen to trade offers. They just sit there and curse the whole time. And feel like, there's a conspiracy out, and then they eventually come around to the fact that their receiving core isn't very good. And so they go with Malik Neighbors at number 6. Number 7, the Tennessee Titans laugh all the way to the bank with the best left tackle in the draft, Joe Alt. Atlanta here needs some split end help, in my opinion, long-term, opposite Arnold Ebiketie. They add Dallas Turner there at number 8. This also could be Jared Verse. I know there's some Verse-ites out there. I see you. I hear you. I think he's right there step for step with Turner. So if this was Verse or whether this was Turner, either way I think this could go. Depends on, I guess, what the flavor is for Atlanta on that pick. But I do think that they go edge there. This takes us then to Chicago at number 9, who looks to add their offensive line. They got Darnell Wright last year, their right tackle in place. How about we start to add a little bit to the left side? So they go with Olu Fashanu. This could also be Troy Fautanu. So we'll get to that here in a second. Again, on this is, I know many of you go, well, they might go that. Well, let's just say it's an either or in these two where their preference might be, depending on how their roster is constructed here a little bit. So Fashanu, Troy Fautanu, Fashanu, whichever you think it might be, bam, that's where they go right there. We've got the New York Jets. This was a pick that I was originally going to have them with Romo Odunze, but then they just went and signed a 1-year contract for $15 million for the Chargers' former wide receiver. So their receiving core, I guess, is kind of set. They could still go with Romo here, but I have them instead going back to invest in the offensive line and trying not to have Aaron Rodgers get another Achilles popping off like it did before. So they go with Fautanu here, but it could be Fashanu if Chicago went with Fautanu. Did you guys get all that? Does that make all sense? Now let's get to Fuwanga. A lot of tongue turners here. So we get to the Chargers then at number 11. And boy, when I think about Harbaugh with the 49ers, did they tend to go out and take high receivers during his time period there? We had Michael Crabtree, I suppose. I think Crabtree was just before he was there. But it seems like they always had offensive linemen. And there was a good investment in offensive linemen there during his time. Mike Iupati. They had the kid on the right side who retired really young that they took in the first round, who was a pretty good player for them for a time period. So I have them going back again here to the offensive line, taking Fuaga out of Oregon State at number 11 after their trade back. This stacks them up with an offensive line of Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, and Fuaga as a nice trio of prospects that they can start to build around with Herbert there. Now, the next few picks just before us, this is definitely one that could be a bit controversial. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of difference opinion versus maybe a little where the upper part of the draft looked here. Understandable. We're getting to the depths of the draft on this, or at least in the midpoints. It gets harder to kind of discern this. I feel like Denver and Vegas are just kind of sitting there laying the weeds both. Again, coming back, Knicks, Penix, Knicks. It just seems like one of those two are going to be the point men here on this part. I also certainly could see a Romo Odunze going to either of these teams as well. Denver's made the trade of Jerry Jeudy. Vegas could obviously look for a little bit of extra receiving help opposite what they have there with Devontae Adams. But the opportunity for both of these two teams to add their quarterback of the future here without having to move up, just sitting there, making their native selection, I think that that's going to be proving too tantalizing not to happen. This leads us to 14, 15, and 16 for our Seattle Seahawks, right in front of us, of course. So you have then New Orleans happy as a clam because they got themselves Romo Odunze there, and he comes in opposite Chris Olave. Then Indianapolis, who needs tight end help, takes Brock Bowers. They can't believe their fortune getting Bowers there at 15, which then has your Seattle Seahawks sitting at 16 with I think the main cluster of options as far as I can tell, and I'm going to be interested to see where you guys land on this one, of course, no doubt about it. But the interesting spot where I think that they sit on this is I think the option between a Jared Verse, we got a Jared Verse or a Dallas Turner. So whoever the Atlanta team took at the top, you get that other edge then sitting there probably. That's a very much a likely possibility. I don't think Atlanta goes offensive line. I looked at their line. It's in good shape. I don't think they go tackle there. I kind of looked a little bit to the depths on this. I think that this is where they go back in that defense. You got a new defensive head coach. I think there's a draw to try to buff up that D just a little bit. So Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, I think is one of the guys that is there is available. And then I think it's going to be either Amarius Mims or Fuwanga. So if we go back up to the Chargers pick there with Harbaugh, certainly Harbaugh might have more of a preference for Mims. I can see Harbaugh definitely with his, the looking like a Marvel character. And I mean, not just that, having I don't think even give up a sack his whole college career. So Mims has got the goods on the field. A lot of people talk about how he looks all rock, but he's also a really good player too. So if let's just say, for the sake of the argument, it is Mims that goes there at number 11. Then you would be looking, I think, at really then what as I break this down, I really think it comes between these two guys looking at there where it's either Dallas Turner or Verse, whoever doesn't go first. And then you're sitting there with a nice right tackle prospect between Mims or Fuanga. I think that's the way this breaks down on that. So not a bad way that this sets up for the draft. You'll be able to definitely pick for value. You'll have a really good player that then lands to you. If it is one of Mims or Fuanga landing there, that's one of my blue chip prospects in this draft. So that would be quite a coup for the Hawks to be able to pull that in if they can come away with this draft having cemented a blue chip player all the way down into the 16th point of this draft. So I think it's set. The stage is getting set really nicely, and the real turn for the Seahawks on this one, the real benefit from them on this one is as things start to develop through this pre-draft process is McCarthy going earlier. The drive on McCarthy to go earlier, and especially if there's a quarterback run, really sets Seattle up in that pole position spot. And it's done on the back again of the free agent period that they've set up here by not having to reach into this first round for needs. They can look at these two guys, right? Think about the difference of this, where let's say it is a Verse or a Fuanga, but let's say you had an absolute need in this draft that you had to go deal with that was outside of those positions of value. You had done something this offseason. Okay, let's do it like this. You hadn't taken your 3-tech with Leonard Williams. You didn't sign Leonard Williams on the 3-year contract. You're there at 16. You've got a Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, or you've got a Fuanga Mims, but then you got a Byron Murphy. And so what leads a team to a bad spot of drafting is they're left into that proverbial scenario, and the GM didn't take care of business in free agency. He walks in the draft. He's looking at his board. He's got Turner higher than Byron Murphy, much higher. He's got Amarius Mims higher than Byron Murphy, much higher. But he's drawn to take Byron Murphy because he's not set his table correctly prior to the draft in order so that he can select the best guy. And that is the difference really keenly down the board of what makes a successful draft and what helps to cause you to fail in a draft. And it's such a small thing because technically you can take a Byron Murphy and go, well, a lot of people have him as the number 1 defensive tackle on their boards. You got to make that kind of pick. You got to make that selection in that spot. That's a no-brainer there because that's such a need for you there. You've got to take that. I mean, the draft pundits will say it on draft day. But no. Make no mistake about it. It is the road that leads to ruin, I tell you. So, last little point I want to make on this before we get over here to the chat. I want to hear your thoughts on my outlook on this and see where you guys see this thing going and where it's kind of heading towards. But the other part that I wanted to take apart is that this is very clear in the 2025 year here that what is happening and going on with this is also an overarching kind of part to this whole process of what's happening is the Seattle Seahawks attempting to make sure 2025 is set up correctly. Now, maybe we contend this year. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater this year saying, well, you had to cut everything down this year, so therefore you can't be good at all this year. No chance. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if you're playing the odds, and Snyder's looks like he's kind of playing the odds based on his approach this offseason, then you're looking to go into 2025 to make some more of those big swings, the type of big swings that you didn't really make this offseason. To show you a little bit of what was a big part of, I think, a part of really instructing their outlook for this offseason in this, not just in the probability of you being a contender next year, but also in how you could have put yourself into a very, very tight, narrow little box for next offseason, a time when you might want to go shoot the moon and really try to drive forward and be that team at the time, but then you're completely chained a little bit by your cap situation. Let me show you what I mean by this. If I can get to it, of course. I can just make it work. There we go. Okay, so you'll notice here, this is the Sports Track numbers for next season. This is 2025, so not this year, next year. And you can see you got the Patriots, Commanders, Lions, all sitting on well over $100 million of cap space. Chargers, Titans, Panthers, Bengals, maybe not, all over $100 million. Bears, over $100 million. Cardinals, $99 million. Okay, well, we keep going down. Boy, we got to, where are Seattle? Where's Seattle at? Where are they at? Okay, there they are. All the way down at the 24th mark, right? Top of the list, $200 million for the Patriots, $139 million for the Commanders. Bottom of the list, Seattle, not bottom, but bottom third. 24th are the Seattle Seahawks. They have $38.5 million. So if you went out there and put 2-3-year contracts out there this offseason, you're putting load up onto next year's books, onto next year's money. And that's already on books that are already running a little bit heavy, right? When you're running the bottom of the third as it is already, you don't want to be in Saintsville, right? You don't want to be entering the offseason or like the Niners are next year, where they're entering in the offseason right now as it's set up with negative amount of cap space. Maybe they roll some over from this year, but that is definitely where they stand right now. So you have set this up now by not all of these deals being one-year deals to be able to then next offseason have these one-year deals fully clear off the books so that you're sitting there with a good amount of money and ammunition there to go make moves. And just so you're not depressed as to think, well, we're 24th. That means we can't do anything for next offseason then. That means that, well, you just bummed me out, Brandon, because you just told me basically even now as we stand, we don't have a lot of money to spend versus all those teams that had $100 million. Well, let me, as always, provide you with a little bit of optimism and easy optimism to see on this one, quite frankly. The Seattle Seahawks have set themselves up not only with these one-year deals, but also with the contract structure next year on a variety of different players to give themselves maximum flexibility. It's not always about cap space. It's about cap flexibility. Ability to move around as you need to move, to not be stuck on a given path, right? That's happened a little bit to the Dolphins this offseason and a little bit of their structure, their contracts, and you just want to try to avoid that. So when you look through these numbers, the column to really pay attention to is the dead cap and the cap hit. Those are the two to pay attention to. And what you'll notice is you go from Geno Smith to Tyler Lockett to DK Metcalf to Leonard Williams to Draymond Jones to Uchenna Nwosu to Noah Fant to Rayshawn Jenkins. All of these deals have a substantial amount of savings to be had off of any movement you might happen to want to do. Lockett retires next offseason, let's say. Well, he's got a $4 million dead money hit. So you're going to save $26 million. Geno Smith, time to move him. There's a deal out there instead. You want to go with the young quarterback. You've drafted your young guy. You're ready to go move on. $25 million to save off of Geno Smith. That's just him and Tyler alone. When you go through, let's remove DK out of the metric of this, but if I just take Geno Smith, Tyler Lockett, Leonard Williams, Draymond Jones, and Uchenna Nwosu, and I say, okay, we're getting their contracts off the books next year. We're just peeling those off because we want to go hog wild into free agency or we want to make a big time trade for something else. You've got $73 million between just those players in savings. And what would $73 million add to the Seahawks 2025 situation at that point? Well, they're sitting on $38 million. So now you've put them over the magical $100 million mark. You've put yourself with relative ease if you want to do it. I'm not saying they want to do it, but if they want to do it at that point, they can with relative ease put themselves in a top 7 situation as far as their cap situation goes if they want to clear the books. And while that might seem, well, how much would they likely want to clear the book? Well, it's been a little while since they've competed. If they think the roster is really ready, if the team's really taking to Mike McDonald, they certainly have shown this offseason they're not shy about cutting money away. They've certainly shown with the Russell Wilson contract, not shy, and especially a lot of the contracts in that year that they cut away, that they're not shy about cutting money away. It's one of the weird narratives that is out there about Jody Allen, for instance, that she doesn't want to spend money or something, when in actuality, and you look at the Seattle Seahawks over just the last 3 years, they are in the top 10 in the NFL in total money spent. We're not talking about contracts you have on the books or money you have on the books for the foreseeable future, but I'm talking brass tacks, bottom line. How much did you actually spend? Seattle Seahawks have been in the top 10 for the past couple of years. Not the past 10 years, not the past 15 years, just the past couple of years. So they are willing to spend. If the time is right to strike, they may jump into that point. They can do so if they want to at that point. If it takes a little more time to let the pot boil, therefore you let it pot boil. And then you're in a really good cap situation the year after that. But they're not in bad cap shape now. This offseason set that up. It's why, as I try to say, this is why my support comes from what the team is doing, because I think they're setting things up smartly. They're playing a little bit of the odds on this, and they're also putting themselves in a position to strike when the time is right. Let me know what you guys think. Please hit that like if you guys could for me in the chat. Do you guys feel like this offseason has been an underwhelming one, or has been a perfect ideal one, or have they set the stage for the future right, as I believe so? Let me know down in the comment section, out here in the chat. We'll be doing a kind of a quicker in and out today. So sorry if we won't be going a little bit as long today. I've got a members only chat or members only stream going on at 5 tomorrow. And of course, we'll be back with the B&B tomorrow at 7 o'clock too. I appreciate you guys watching today. Talon Deal has started us off with a $10 donation. Talon, I appreciate you for doing that, and a little late in acknowledging, but thank you nonetheless. Says, I naturally want to pick at 16 best player available, but man, there's so many good players in the top 75. Edrin Cooper, Tyler Newbin, Colson, Bebe. I'm all in on trading back 2 or even 3 times. Feels weird to say. Just beneath the surface of your comments, Talon, there's so much, I think, history at play in what you're talking about. Because there are people, and rightfully so, I'm sure you're one, I'm one myself, that when you go back to drafting, theory in 2017, 18, 19, you have a John Schneider just actively, constantly looking to trade back and collect picks. And it would drive Seattle fans crazy. Because we would pass on really good players to do that. And you felt like you were paying the price to move back. You were losing out on so much more of a quality, talented player by going and getting that extra pick. And i.e., it just wasn't worthwhile to do it. And I think that you touch on something in your comment. Thank you again for the $10 donation, but you touch on something that is where I'm at as well with this. I'm in that frustrated state with those fans that were in that trading back didn't work for us then. And I understand that then there's a natural inclination to say, so therefore we no longer trade back anymore because it didn't work before. I get that. That's the whole thing I talk about with learning your lessons and all that. Completely smart. The part where I say it's got to be a little bit different, where the door's got to be open and still being willing to do it, is you never want to close the door on individual draft evaluations of draft classes and what talent is out there and what you have available and where the strength of the talent is in a given draft, Talon. And it's been something that stood out to me for a couple of months in looking at this crop, is that this second tier zone of the draft is really where you want to be. Why is it the most valuable? Well, it's because you're getting a lot more guys in that realm than you normally would be able to get. That tier would normally shrink up a lot faster than it is because it's a tier that tends to begin in the early part of the first round. So there's a lot of times it doesn't even make its way barely halfway to the second round, and it's like, now you're into tier 3. I don't see it as being that way this year. I can tell with your comments on the players that you mentioned, you don't see it being that way this year. And I walk away from that going, well, let's get more of those players in that zone, because these are guys who are not only in that tier 2 range of being above average players, but also have maybe just a little bit extra more than that to add to you. You might find your second round guy out there in this draft that's like a Kelsey that was taken in the second round, or like a Jones on the defensive line that was taken in the second round. You could find that in this crop of these players. And I just want, if I can have one more extra jump at them there, rather than only one pick at them at 16, I think I got to double dip. I got to double dip the chip. But I know why it frustrates some Hawk fans. Like you say, it feels weird to say, I think, for many that feel that way. You go, man, it does feel weird to say because I feel so strongly about how stupid that was to trade back. But I do remember even at the time with a lot of the folks that were mad about trading back. There were active players at the time that Seahawks fans, not myself, even just that in my interactions with the chat at the time, that would say, this guy, don't trade back, just take Montez Sweat. No, let's trade back and get LJ Collier. What? So it's individual draft. You looked at that individual draft, you went, ooh, it's a good edge draft there, but you want to, there's kind of been a run on this first round. If you're not getting one of those guys, that top crew, don't stretch. Don't stretch if you don't get the top crew guys. We stretched. So it's trading back. I think talent is going to be the draw here when it's all said and done. And if John gets, I think, even a remotely decent third round offer in there, he's going to be jumping at least one SPAC. Maybe it's only 5, 6. He is going to get an extra pick back come hell or high water this draft, Talon. Thank you for the donation, though. I appreciate you. Very kind of you, man. And thank you as well for being a member of the channel as you are as well. Daniel Berry, how you doing? Let's go. Hawkaholic. Hello, Mark Habercorn. What's up in the house? Card Crazed, good evening. How you doing? He says, I'm just heating up my dinner. I hope it's a tasty dinner. Josh, already 10 likes. We haven't even started yet. That's how we do in the Hawks Nest. Jared G, what's up? Holy hand grenade from Chad Hart. Hello. Mark says, I bet they still like a quarterback in the draft. Like and sub, please. I can see it, Mark. I don't think that's the nice thing about setting this roster up in the way that you have is that you can use a position kind of anywhere, but you don't need a position anywhere. You could take the quarterback because you're not going into that need spot where you're like, no, well, we like this guy here with that value. It's kind of like my my last mock draft I just did, where it's like, I'm not really in favor of taking Penix in this draft. I think you've got to be very careful in taking Penix, but at the same time, if you've traded down a couple of times and you're getting him into that second round, it's a bit of a different area for me. Ethan Tech World, the Hawks Nest, can't remember if you've answered this. I'm starting to like the idea of a new premier edge rusher. While Dallas Turner is unlikely, what do you think of him and Jared Verse? My opinion is that both players are very, very close at the end of the day in their upside and what they bring. They're a little bit different players, but their ending point is basically about the same spot. For those that would say, well, Verse is better to me, I'd say, okay, I get it. I'm a little more preferential to Turner, but I would get the argument that would say that I like Verse better. What really stands out with Verse is that he can do both things as a pass rusher. He can both be quick and twitchy off the edge, and he can bend and dip around the arc. And then he also has distinct enough power to hit you up with a bull rush so that when you try to climb too hard to get to the edge of that arc to catch him before he can bend around it, he's hitting you with the bull rush, and you're not rooted down, you're not anchored down in the least to be able to deal with that. And so Verse is a guy that's going to work at the NFL level with that skill set almost alone. He's good against the run, good against the pass. I'm doing a lot of scouting right now, some cornerbacks out there in that Florida State defense, and they got a lot of guys to look at. Braden Fisk. Your eyes always do end up coming back to him for the effort he puts out on the field as well as that. So Verse is a really good complete player, deserving of being picked in the top 15. No doubt about that. And with Turner, I just have a little bit of I don't know. There's just something and again, very close between the two for me, but there's just a little bit something I like a little bit extra in Dallas Turner. But I wouldn't be mad at Jared Verse at all. It'd be a good pick. And certainly I think Jared Verse is better than what you've got in Derek Hall and what he put on tape last year at least. We'll see where Hall can go with that, and might be better than what you have in Uchenna. It's one thing to always remember with the Seattle Seahawks is that their evaluation of players, they've said many times, is not just the evaluation of the players themselves and how good they are on the college field. It's also a measurement up against what the Seattle Seahawks have in the depth in their building at given positions. I think edge is going to be a drive. Kelly, how you doing? Been hearing talks about Jamal coming back, maybe just for depth. Heard as a linebacker. You know I love that man. If you want to bring him back for depth and he's cheap at this point, I'm not mad at it. It's a flyer situation. As I always say, one of the best deals you can offer me in football is a low cost, high reward. I'll take those very, very often. I'll be hard pressed to turn those down, Kelly. So if that can work and he wants to come back and make it happen, then let's go, as far as I'm concerned. Frank D, how you doing? See how this game is signing Randy Gregory's like signing Alden Smith and Ziggy Ansah. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot there. That sign doesn't do much to me either. I'd love to get Clowney too. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're much in play on Clowney. But I'd like to see it too, Seahawks gaming. DVN says Penix in a mock. What? Never thought I'd see the day. I got to change these up a little bit, DVN. I can't just have them go all the same every time, you know. I got to flip them a little bit. Rather cat JJ's going so high made me throw up a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to be laughing my ass off on draft day, and I don't even care. I'm going to be laughing my ass when Minnesota not only takes him in the top 10, but trades up to take him. Oh, it's perfect. Nick, good evening, B&12s. How you doing, Nick? Unknown says, whose house? Hawks house. Whose house? Hawks house. Let's go. Sorry if he didn't get it. I'm fighting for democracy. I got to get the Helldivers game. It does look fun. I was watching some of that today just a little bit. Always compete. How you doing, man? Hawksnest says, of all the prospects you've scouted, do you have any guys in your day 3 range that you would say are your guys, sort of like Abraham Lucas, 2022, whom you absolutely loved? Yes, I did love me some Lucas. Day 3, it's of course hard with it on the question of that because, I mean, like Lucas, even Lucas went in round 3, not day 3. So it's harder. There is a bit of a difference between, I think, round 3 to day 3 guys, where it does get harder when you're talking about the diamond and the rough cats because they're rough. They've got some they've got some definite stuff that's rough. I think Mike Sanistrill, I don't know. I'm probably mispronouncing him. Just call him Little Mike out of Michigan, is one of the better slots in the draft who you could end up getting, I think, in like the 4th round. And he's just he's a dog in there. You know what I mean? He gets after it. He's really fun. I think that Jaden Hicks has got some uneven tape, but he's got some upside to him that to me stands out. And, I don't think his best days, I know there's a lot of college prospects you say this, but I really don't think necessarily his best days are still ahead of him on that side of it. Defensively, it does get lean in this draft into the day 3-ish range. I think guys that are put as far as being day 3 that I have in day 2, which is a little more maybe at the heart of your question. Kamal Hodden is a guy that I think I have higher up on my boards than some people do. TJ Tampa, Renardo Green, we'll talk about those Florida State cornerbacks. Those are guys that I think I definitely have a little bit higher up. Mohamed Kamara and Javon Solomon are 2 guys that I have higher on my board, I think, than most people have on their boards. That's about it defensively, really. I like Katana Oladipo out of Oregon State. On the offensive side of the ball, Roger Rosengarten, right tackle, is a guy I've had up. I mean, he started to sound like he's starting to raise up the spot I had him at now, where a month ago it was like, 6th, 7th round guy. It's like, second, 3rd round guy to me. I love the thought of getting Zach Frazier, or not Zach Frazier, but Zach Zinter if he dips into this draft, especially if you get him into day 3 all day long, every day. That's your right guard of the future. Tip Ryman, the tight end that I think has legitimate upside to his game, who might dip into that 3rd day, kind of side of things. I'm enraptured a little bit by the fast running back. There's been guys that have come out in recent years that I'm not talking about your bell cow backs or part of the 2-man rotation. I'm just talking about your specialist guys that come in there just to be burners. The Ravens had a guy like this last year. You had Devon A-Chain there with the Dolphins was this guy. I mean, they might only give you 60 carries over the course of the season, but they'll average like 8 yards a carry. Kind of liked looking at Isaac Guerrero, a late guy you get a little bit later on, is maybe a guy that might fit a little bit to that mold. And then I don't know where Luke McCaffrey's going to go, but if he got to day 3, that'd be tremendous value for him. On the offensive line, Tanner Bortolini, his movement ability, day 3, all day. I think when you get into day 3 of the draft for offensive linemen and finding guys that are mobile, it gets a little bit tough to find. It's not easy. So I don't know if I've got a guy that I've raised up into 1st round grade status because I had a 1st round grade on Lucas, so I definitely don't have a guy that I think I have up in the 1st round grade this year that most others wouldn't probably have in the 1st round. And I'm probably, Tyler Newman had a poor testing day today out in Minnesota. So he is probably going to have to dip off my 1st round board at this point. He went like 4.65 on the 40 and just slow 10-yard split. Kind of bummed me out a little bit, but yeah. So those would be some of my diamonds. Diamonds in the rough. Brad Forsythe says trade down, Brett. Card Craze, what would we get if we could trade it down? 1 second or 2 seconds or 1 second round plus other lower pick? I thought card craze, what you try to do is you go to a team like Green Bay. Let's say a Romo Odunze does slip to 15. Can you talk a Green Bay and team to jump into 15, moving back to 26? You get just a pure second round pick, trade back with him at that point. Now, maybe you can move back another 7 or 8 spots into the top of the second round. Maybe flip one of your 4th round picks to package together with that to then pull another late second round pick out. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe that's being a little bit greedy, card crazed, but I certainly, like many I'm seeing in the chat here, would be aggressive to try to drive down that road if I could, if I'm John Schneider. Because again, that's where I think the value is going to be had in this draft. At the very least, I do believe you should be able to pull card crazed one pure middle to late second round pick with a trade back. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 11 spaces back in the first. Brett says liquidate Metcalf. Seahawks getting Bowers to Chargers makes sense. Harbaugh did have Vernon Davis, who was the best tight end prospect before he ran a 4.38 40 as a tight end. Indeed, I was thinking about that a little bit too, Seahawks gaming. I didn't eventually mock Bowers to the Niners because Harbaugh did inherit Vernon Davis when he came there. So he didn't actually select Vernon Davis, and they never really took a tight end high. I guess they did have that one guy that was they took in the second round, I think, out of Rice one year. Luke, wasn't it Luke Wilson's teammate that they drafted in the second round one year there? So it's possible. Bowers is definitely maybe in the table there. I did have him as a possibility. I just thought, man, they've got an opening there, right tackle. They can sew that down with a really good player, guy like Mims or Fuwanga. Both of 2 guys I think who would appeal to Harbaugh. But Bowers is in play, no doubt about that. At least the entire idea of trading Metcalf so stupid. You lose your best weapon to get a pick that maybe gets you a new weapon, and you spend more to trade him. Just silly. Agreed, Haley. I think you have an asset and a player of Metcalf's ability and a still untapped potential. I don't think that you look to move him, and he is. I think it's one of those things that happens too is when you have a guy, Haley, I think that's been in the league so many years like he has, it feels like the player to the general fans that here's a guy who's got to be like 28, 29 years old. So he's got to be, get into that. And it's like, no, he's just 25, going to be 26 or something like that, or just turned 26 years old. So he's easily got 3 to 4 more seasons of very, very, very prime DK Metcalf to give you. And I would certainly like to be able to benefit from that during the time as a team. Brett says, if you get 2 first rounds and a second for Metcalf and Lockett, would you do it? Sort of depends on what we're talking about the first round picks being, Brett. Because, if these are 2 first round picks at the back end of the draft or middle to the back end of the draft, my answer is no, I wouldn't. I think that, I just think, I think that the draw to move Metcalf doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Brett. They've already done a lot to clear the table out here to where everything's set really nicely, and there's no real situation where Metcalf's not helping you when you're trying to become that team a year from now that can go out there and compete and make it happen. Always Competes says interesting ideas. Fuanga's worth number 16. I think DeJean and JSP will be amazing NFL core players. Cooper DeJean's another one that possibly is in play. They're Always Compete. I think the Hawks do like him a little bit. And Jackson Powers, it certainly is high for a center, given the lay of the land in history, but another one, like you said, wouldn't shock me on either of those 2 guys if they picked it. And both those 2 guys, to me, would be really, to your point, solid selection. He said it'd be nice to drop down and pick up one of those guys and acquire a second-round pick to get Peyton Wilson. I'm with it. I'm totally with it. AI says, how you doing, man, AI? A good YouTube channel with mock drafts is Mike McKee. You draft today with us. Would die for, traded back 3 times to get 10 picks. He has done 16 different draft versions. Nice. It's that season. Kieran says, B, isn't saying they won't be competitive the next year because it's the first year of a new coaching. Isn't saying they won't be competitive next year because it's the first year, but I am. Statistically, there's a very high probability Mike Donald doesn't have his guys. It's true. It's true. I just don't want to bum people out too much with it because I think there is a foreseeable path here to them having some success next year. But to your point, it's probabilities are probabilities, and high probabilities are high probabilities. And Haley, trading back twice. That would be the magic. If we end up trading back twice and we were able to somehow bamboozle some teams and came away with it where we're picking somehow maybe in the first, into the high end of the second round, and then we have 2 other second round picks and 1 third round pick and 2 fourth round picks. I think that would be pretty cool. He's just new offseason, same old little finger. Kevin says, what if we traded the team? What can we get? Brandon Dixon Hawks, how you doing, man? Trading down definitely is the hot to trot piece here. Fans since 92. I think the Hawks have pieced this team together well. I think we can keep and compete next season. I'm excited to see what we do in the draft. Me too. Well said, fan. AI says, I do a lot of drafts every day. Sometimes you get offers to move back. Sometimes the offers are shite. Yeah, there is some tough ones where you're like, come on, give me something. And then they'll give you stuff like for week 2025 picks. Haley says, also, hi, B. I'm not going to be in the chat too much. Migraine killing me. Lurking, though. Sounds good, Haley. I got hit with one of those last week that put me down for a whole day. I was like, what just hit me? What in the hell happened? OMW2 says, Rashawn Jenkins is such a great underrated signing. He's going to be our Hamilton. I love the confidence there, OM. I hope you're right. I watched a little initial tape on him. I'm still kind of doing a bit of a deep dive on him. Kind of owe the channel a video on him here. I think he's the only free agent I haven't been able to kind of really cover. But I wasn't able to get a lot off the initial viewing, but he didn't do anything bad. He was in the right place. Safety position get hard because sometimes you get through 5-6 plays where they're doing their job, but they're just out of the framework of the play. Guys, honestly, I doubt Bowers falls to us, but any possibility Rome could fall, I would love taking him, setting up Romo, DK, and JSN for the future after Tyler. I think there's a possibility he falls. I think the Jets picking up the receiver in free agency increased the chances a little bit more, especially the other day, because that's the team I thought would be jumping on that receiver at that point. Get them somebody, go opposite Garrett Wilson out there. And I could see it go down that round. So it's a possibility. I do think he still gets taken at some point ahead of us, but he'll be there. I think he'll be within they'll be within a couple of picks of us where he gets taken, or he'll be in the sight line. Mr. APAC Leb, why keep trading down? There are only 52 real roster spots. Most positions are locked down except interior offensive line, linebacker, tight end, safety. Is that extra third rounder going to displace a right guard Bradford or Ulu at center? Great question, Mr. Aplazad. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name on that one. You certainly have done a lot to fill the holes on the roster. I think a little bit of what tends to happen with this type of stuff is that you see roster moves made after a draft where you may have a guy, who is like a guy like Darrell Taylor, for instance, who's on the roster right now at $3 million, and Seattle drafts a guy, and they go, you know what? We like the guy we drafted instead. When we drafted you before, we didn't know we'd have an option to get Jared Verse in the first round. Now we did. Thank you for your service, Darrell Taylor. We're going to just let you go. You saved your $3 million. You move on. So you're able to do these kind of things a little bit. For instance, again, nose tackle, Mr. A. I'm going to call you Mr. A. You have 3 nose tackles at this point. You're not going to be likely to be drafting a nose tackle here, but maybe you take Devondre Sweat in the second round and then you move Jaron Reed. Or you move on from Cam Young. Maybe they're not high on some of these guys at these roster spots that we may like a little bit, or that they go, that's not going to be enough out there. There's a variety of these different spots over around, both on the offense and defensive side of the ball, where you can kind of make these kind of moves. I would say, to your point, when you're talking about like tackle, yeah, you're definitely, you've got no real room in there to do anything there unless you're going to get a guy who can play guard too. But there's room at middle linebacker, there's room at will. There's flexibility of movement at both your defensive tackle positions. There's flexibility of movement at the edge. You could add another safety. There's flexibility of movement at cornerback. You have the Mike Jackson on the contract for a 1-year, $3 million deal. It's not guaranteed. My understanding is you can, and certainly at that point, what a lot of teams do with this a little bit is that they will find a way to go into a draft day, Mr. A, and they'll have the players like a Jackson or a Taylor on the roster and know that they're worth something as far as trade capital goes. Maybe not a lot, but now they can wait till they've picked the replacement and then move him for that 5th or 6th round pick in a draft. And they feel good to do that there too. So it's still, even though the roster is set up and good, there's still, that's where it comes. The whole point of the flexibility is you can still come back and take anything at that point, and then it becomes kind of a first world problem of like, oh, we have too many nose tackles. What are we going to do? And then finding a creative solution. And some teams out there that can then utilize that to gather more draft capital. It's like what the Eagles are doing with Hassan Reddick right now. Like, they like Hassan Reddick, but why did they take Nolan Smith with their 2nd first-round pick last year, Mr. A, when they had Brandon Graham, when they had Josh Sweat, when they were really set up on their edge? The reason that they did it is because he was looking out ahead was Roseman into this offseason, where he knew the contract for Reddick really comes into hit. Can he find a team out there that wants to give him value for Hassan Reddick? And then he can just, instead of having to find the replacement with Nolan Smith, just bump him into the starting spot. And that's that, roster building at all times of years, and change can come in at all times and points of years a little bit. Great question, though. Brian says, don't think Bowers or Odunze falls to 16. I don't think, Brian, to your point, it's a above 50% likelihood in best case scenarios. Definitely low odds on that one. DVD, I like Fisk at the combine. Quick and really solid footwork. He was very good and quick at the combine for sure. He's getting a little pushed high at this point at times for me, for what I saw on the tape with the kid, where I'm like, there's no doubt about the kid's effort on tape. There's no doubt he gives you everything he's got every snap. But the short arms show up. He gets swallowed up at times. And it wasn't like he was being asked to play one tech. He's playing, maybe he's asked to do some 2 gapping there with Florida State, but he's still playing a 3 tech. So oh, goodness, Megan, I'm sorry. A little late on Senior Don't Know there. My bad. It's good to see you in the house, though. My lady from down under dropping $100 donation. Thank you for that, Megan. Oh, very, very kind of you for that. I appreciate you. She says, hey, B, what grade do you give our free agent dealings this year? Sorry, can't stay as I'm catching up on things I couldn't get done early in the week, but we'll talk soon. Well, if you aren't seeing this donation, I'll catch you later on Twitch and give you a thank you for that one there. But thank you for the $100 donation. That is really, really kind on you. I probably land on about, in this free agency period, a B+, all things being considered. It'd be a strong B+, like an 89%, like a Doug Baldwin, Megan. I don't think that there's any bad deals that have been given out. I love that you understood the lay of the land. I mean, that's the best part about this free agent period, is beyond any of the signings. It's the understanding of where you are as a team and the moves you need to make from that structure, which I think has really guided the process through, while also saying that stage I talk about next year and for this draft coming up, Megan. I mean, that's the best parts of what you've done in this free agency beyond players that you've added. But the guys you've added, especially when you talk about defensive players, fit to the scheme that you need to run, and you need the players to run the scheme. That's a lesson that we've definitely been faced with here in Seattle over the last couple of years, and not having always the players we need to run the scheme. And now you at least do. These are all good functional players, and having them all in that 1-year deal, I mean, you're going to have people giving you all they got. There's nobody sitting comfortable with their legs kicked up on the field going, I got a 3-year deal. I'll try next year. Oh. No, none of that. There's going to be a lot of people like, I'm trying to go get my money next year. So it's a B+. There's a couple signings that are not necessarily in the bad state of things for me, Megan, or even that I'm down on, but I don't think that they're, Rashad Jenkins with the 2-year, $12 million deal, it's okay. You got the out after a year. It's kind of a de facto 1-year deal, really, with some dead money next year, essentially, if you really want to look at it. Re-signing Darrell Taylor to a 1-year, $3 million deal. The retaining of Darrell Taylor doesn't, make a lot of sense to me. But they didn't really give out a lot of deals for there to be a lot of like, well, that's bad money there. That's bad money there. $5 million to Dodson, $7 million to Jerome Baker, a couple million here to Fant, a couple million here to Pharaoh Brown, who gives you something very specific. and what you're paying for. You're not getting everything, but you're getting something specific to what you're paying for. There's not a lot of bad money there to really point at on that. So, solid B plus, Megan, overall. But really for almost more, normally I would give that grade out, Megan, for players that just the exact players you've taken and what they're worth and what you're giving them and the value of the contract you've got on them. For me, this particular offseason, it's a couple of other things that are weighing a little more heavily on that than that side of things. AI, I'll check out that stream. My guy, for sure. For sure. Mikey. Always compete. And thank you again, Meg. You're so awesome. That $100 donation. Unbelievable support. Nick says, just bought Helldivers and yeesh. Lots of dying and team killing, laughing out loud. Not that far in yet either. Yeah, it sounds a little bit like it can get a little bit live in there. And you always love when they've got the friendly fire turned on. But it's kind of off Starship Troopers, and there's a very funny scene in Starship Troopers of friendly fire. It's very dark. It's dark humor, but it's funny as well. Brian Myers should be able to drop 8 to 10 spots and get a second rounder in the trade. Exactly. May have to throw in one of the fourth rounders. Exactly. That's and I'm willing to do it on that, Brian. But I think that we're all very much in alignment on going, there's the path, This is the path to Seahawks righteousness. Philip Castle, Tanner Bortolini. Hope to take him in the fourth round. He's a guy that if you get him in the fourth round, I think that's good value, Philip. A pure scheme fit, no better mover at the combine in the interior of the offensive line. And that's got to be something that's going to be held in high regard for whoever we bring in the offensive line. Can you move in space? Can you get from point A to point B? Not just simply can you block the man in front of you. Can you run from this spot to that spot and then hit the strike point accurately? A lot of guys in college can't get out of their stance. They can get out of their stance and they can move in space, but they can't get there on time. They can get out of their stance, they can move in space, they can get on there in time, but then they don't have an accurate strike point. Their hands are coming out and they're whiffing at air, or they're hitting the side of the shoulder and the guy's glancing off and getting back to make the tackle. Can they put all that together? And if you are such a comfortable mover like Bortolini is, you can get to your spot on time to where you're not rushing to get there, and then that gets you he's more under control at that point to get those movement-based blocks hit. But good player on film, solid player, not spectacular, just kind of gets the job done. One of those Wisconsin linemen. That's what sometimes they do, They'll just be in there they maybe have to chew on you to get you blocked, but they'll get you blocked. It may not be pretty, but it'll get the job done. Don Steelers says, speaking of dogs, bring on Fatanu. He's definitely a possibility in this draft if he dips. I would certainly, if he landed in Seattle, would have him as a guy potentially mock to Seattle here, Don. I think he's going to get taken ahead of us, though. Yeah, Rogers Green, Darrell Taylor's the head scratcher for me, too. Chris says, Clowney's more of an expensive one-trick pony than Taylor, so think they decided to go the cheap route for now. Clowney could still be available in June or July. He could. He is a guy that does last. And certainly power is basically, I guess you're talking about the one-trick pony part, but the one nice part is he is a complete player. I mean, if you're talking about giving Clowney a $7-8 million deal versus giving Taylor a 1-year, $3 million deal, I at the very least, Clowney gives me upper level strength as an edge run defender with pass rush. Darrell Taylor gives me nothing as a run defender and hot and cold, streaky pass rush. Yeah. I'll take the offsuit. Don Steeler says, yeah, Metcalf is the kind of player you build around rather than punt for picks. Amen. It gets brought up a lot here, Don. I don't know why as much as it does. I'm not a proponent of it at all. No, thank you. No, thank you. Hawk Skulls is a trade with the Green Bay should return us 2 seconds and a third on the value charts. That'd be nice. I'd sign me up for that, man. I'll make that trade all day if we can pull that. Even just get us 2 seconds off the pull. And you go back to the first and well, I guess you're saying so we'd get 2 seconds and the third, not their first round pick then. And then they'd have 2 firsts. They do have multiple picks, I think, in the second round too. John's going to do something. he's gonna get a little wild with it. I feel pretty certain. Pretty certain at this point. Nick says, as I always say, with giving Geno a decent offensive line, give DK 120 plus targets. We would never hear another trade DK because he would be putting up all those top tier numbers. Amen, Nick. Well said. And hopefully that's what's coming now. I think that's a big part of Grub and what he understands is what he's brought here to do on, you're given this talent. You need to maximize it and find a way to feature it. And he certainly did at Washington. But DK's got to be at the forefront of that. Very much agree. Megan says, Hawks Nest, no trading back ever. Nick says, drafting a bunch of players is fun, but all of them contracts come up at the same time. Could be interesting to see how it works out. Yeah, it does put you a little bit in a bind at those times, though. If they all are working out and playing good as players, I mean, it's a good problem to have. First world problems, as they say. Big Roy Plumbing. Am I the only one who thinks Zerzan Newton is going to be a bust? I think his tape is really uneven. Big Roy Plumbing, to your point. And uneven tape is certainly the tape that at times in the past has been a lead way to bust city for certain prospects. I've gone back and forth on the tape. When I first turned it on, I was like, oh yeah, okay, here we go. I can see this and that's great. And then went back on the tape again around mid-year and kind of looked in and I was like, boy, is he having a kind of a down year? Everything's kind of quiet. He's disappearing in football games. Went back again and kind of liked a little bit of some extra things I was watching, especially kind of his, downward swim move thing that he does. He's got a real violent downward swim move, kind of windmill thing he does. That gets him free off blocks, and then he's got the short area quickness to bound his way to the quarterback ball carrier. But I can say I can see how it's a possibility, man. I have a second round grade on him at this point, Big Roy Plumbing, but I think the consensus on him still has him as a first round graded guy, which I can't see. Medic, that's the scene, El Destructor. I laughed way too hard at that scene every time I've seen that movie. It's such a dark bit of humor, but it's freaking hilarious. Medic. They should have a cutscene of that they got to include that in that game somehow. He uses B+ is very generous. C outside of Williams and Howell signings, those two pull it up to a B-. Oh, not that far apart then. And it wasn't an extravagant spending. That's for sure. But it's also one where, given where I see the year at right now, and that they're not in a position really to be a contender next year. Well, what's the point of adding money on the books for 2025 at that point, or this upcoming year, substantial money that, you're essentially trying to get that player who helps you this year, but then you're like kind of so that you have a little bit of more money on the books next year to have to get out from under. I'd just rather take all that hit right now a little bit and then preserve next year for the time when it's more right to hit. But, on my grade, I'll be a lot more harsher as we get into next year once they get to that place and that stage to now let it rip and let it roar and they come back and go, here's another 1 year deal. Here's another 1 year deal. Well, then at that point, I'll certainly be like, okay, we're not going to be in the B range this year. Philip Castles' offensive guard Frank Crum was top 5 in all categories tested with 34 and 3/4 inch arms. Another good tester in there. I don't think I've had a chance to quite got him on my list, I think. Man, I don't have him on my list for some reason. What is going on? I have seen his name come through, so I don't know why I don't have him on, but I got to take a look at him too before the draft. For the reasons that you spoke about. Oh, there we go. Wyoming kid. 6'8", 313. I only had 33 and 7/8. It's still very big, but I think Phillip only 33 7/8 inch. But a pretty good tester. Under a 5 flat 40. DVD says, B, is this the right place to begin my campaign of wearing the throwbacks for the home opener? It's a good place as any, my man. I think they might be giving us some new uniforms this year. That was a whole rumor. We might be hearing about that the next couple months. Randall McDaniel, thank you for the $5 donation. Good to see you in the house, my brother. Hope you're doing well. Hope the fam's doing well. If you were a gambling man of all these short-term free agent signings, who would you bet on most likely to get extended after the year? Ooh. Good question. That's a hard mother-effing question to answer. Who would I bet is extended? My guess on this one would be, Randall, that Tyrell Dodson would be the guy likely to have this occur. He could be really rounding into shape as a player. He's still a really young guy. He'll still be a very young guy next year. Baker's not old, but I think Seattle's going to be much more likely to be trying to target that middle linebacker position. And I think with the will, they'll be like, we'll get to that in a year, you know. We'll address the mic in the draft. Maybe they get to both. Maybe both are kind of handled here. But with Dotson, I could see him fitting in and really fighting some footing there as that will linebacker in this defense. And with his age and everything considered, just fitting into being that guy for you going into the future at the will position. And I don't think he'll cost he wouldn't have had a good year. I still don't think he'd cost a tremendous amount of Seattle, so it makes it more feasible, Randall, that deal gets done at that point. But him or Jerome Baker probably, because both those guys could come in on a one-year deal, have a solid season, and that kind of be enough at that point. But I do feel like Dotson would be my far and away number one guy on that. Great question, Randall. Great question, man. Thank you for the dono. Appreciate you for that. I dig the Hawks. Brandon, what draft pick would you use to get an edge if you let Taylor walk? I'm hoping McDonald can turn water into wine, not wine. I see what you did there. Well, I do think that because you're sitting in a place like I was looking at with the situation as far as the kind of way this could play out with the, in my opinion, with the first round, which is kind of what I'm showing right here, and to where you've got these picks kind of play out in that first round to where you selected 16, and you're looking at having the value of your picks at that point drive you to edge. You know, the highest value you got at that point addicted to Hawks, and when you get to 16 is either Jared Verse or Dallas Turner, one of two guys who would be available on your board. So I think that that's a very likely place if you're talking about in this draft for them to select edge. I think it would be probably as likely a place as any spot in this draft that they select an edge outside of maybe the 4th or 5th round, taking a guy like Marshawn Nealand, you know, more of a flyer kind of pick. But there is a dip in the talent of this draft. Once you get past probably Darius Robinson, maybe Chop Robinson, once you get past one of the Robinsons, it's a little bit of a dip off the edge class at that point. Not bad players, but just a little bit of a dip. But almost kind of, you could do it in any round, really. I think the best value is round 1. He says, hopefully Littlefinger sandbagging with his offensive line comments. I hope, man. We need to get this line right. Get this Ryan guy. Brian Myers, Brandon, Miles Cole. Yeah, I didn't like a lot of Miles Cole tape. I watched it the other night. I just wanted him to be better. Be better, Miles. You know? Will you just be better? So Miles, of course, lit things up with having a really great combine, had almost 37, yes, I said that right, 37-inch long arms on a 6'6" build, ran a 4.67 with that build. So you go, my God, nobody that big should move like that. Kind of got kind of that old Carlos Dunlap kind of build, but he's complete crap against the run, Brian. He just doesn't hold up against the run on a variety of different levels. He's a real big edge with a lot of dexterity for his size. He shows a really great ability to get low and win the leverage war. He's got those long levers. A lot of physical stuff there to work with on it. But he just doesn't have a lot of power and true strength there to really that shows up. Initially, everything looks good, but it just doesn't kind of click in, play in and play out. There's really no awareness for him in space. And teams would run at him. That's the other thing. For as big as he was, you'd think he'd set the edge and teams wouldn't be willing to kind of go at him as much, but teams went right at him, just knowing that, hey, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to get blocked up and stand there. He also doesn't give you much as a pass rusher. He's got kind of just a couple of moves. I reference in my notes, he's got a couple of moves, but not really any counters. And then when you see him go to, say, a rip, it's softly set as using a feather to choke someone out. So I wasn't Brian a big, huge fan of Miles Cole's tape. Very often out of control, moving into space. He does got good effort in pursuit. Only one pass defense for a guy that's as tall as he is at 6'6". Like, figured he'd have more arms he'd knock down, forehands. I don't know. Day 3 rotational edge, but I don't know what he gives you exactly because he doesn't exactly stop the run well or rush the passer. He's a big body that moves well, Brian, you know? But I wanted to see more. I was very, very unenthused by his tape. It was no good. Eric says, at Hawks Nest, with our new look secondary, do you think we'll see Woolen return to form, especially now that we will have better coverage over the middle? I'm open so. I mean, it's really about the development of him as a tackler and how and his willingness to be tenacious in the run game. I think it's the combination of those two that stand out. He wasn't bad in coverage last year. He was still pretty well graded on that side of it, and especially in man coverage situations, he really did hold up well. I think there's certainly going to be a draw by Mike McDonald to lean on these corners on the outside at times to lock down in man coverage situations and try to see if he can then make things a lot more uncomfortable up front. I mean, if I was McDonald, I just want to run some of that as a tester throughout the year this year. Like, can I rock with having those two guys out there and sort of that Darrelle Revis, Cromartie thing from the Jets and just let them hold up on the outside and then I just control all the action into the middle? I'd love to see them try that out. And that's both with Woolen and Witherspoon. What they did at their best last year was in man coverage. So it's possible. It certainly is possible that they roll with that. I don't think there's upside there with them, Eric, but it's really just that, can you develop as a former wide receiver, as a guy that didn't tackle for years in football, can you develop the tackling instinct? Can you get a willingness down there to wrap up and get those guys down? It's really a buy-in kind of thing as much as anything else, I think. And whether or not he's going to from that front of things is really the ultimate determination on whether this guy's potentially, I think, going to be able to be given a nice, big, fat next contract or not. Because if he's putting more of the tape out last year than he did, then it's going to be hard for him to receive that. But I think he's going to get the shot, Eric. I do. John, M429, thank you for the $5 donation. Very kind of you, John. I hope you're having a good night, too, as well. Thanks for watching. Says, thanks for the content. Who is your favorite outside free agent signing for us? And how about one for another team? Oh, great question. Great question. So first, my favorite free agent outside signing. Hard to say. Boy, it's hard to say. Probably the Leonard Williams one, John, at the end of the day. I mean, all the other ones, I kind of all equally could go to in saying, well, Dotson here's nice. Baker means you don't have to reach for a middle linebacker. Fant gets you swing tackle ability, and he can play a little tight end as the third tight end in 13 personnel. But getting Leonard Williams cemented up, I am looking at this now through the view of 2025 as a go mode. That this team will be into essentially at that point year 4 of a rebuild. The young guys will be ready. We'll have the cap space to make it go. We're going to be getting compensatory picks on either side of it, and we needed a 3-tech that could be the kind of player that Leonard Williams is. The type of guy that I didn't think we were going to be able to find in this draft. The type of guy that's been very hard to find to add to this defensive line in recent years. And I thought that he came in here last year and was just what the doctor ordered. And it's not that he's a superstar or Chris Jones or Aaron Donald, but you know exactly what you're getting from him, and he gives you that. And I think it is a very important thing to be able to add to the defense because I don't think all NFL teams have it, John. And I think that those teams that do have this kind of player hold on to him as much as they can with all they got. Unless they're a team like the Giants that are just in that sort of like last year trying to do all they can to add extra picks. Maybe with a thought process that they want to try to move up in this draft with those extra picks to get their quarterback so they can move on from Daniel Jones, which of course then has nothing to do with Leonard Williams or where he's as a player, how good he is as a player. But that would be my one. That would be my one. I know that's not an outside free agent, but it's hard for me on any of these outside free agents to raise one up over the other. I mean, Dotson and Baker are pretty equivalent, I think. I if I could combo them together, I guess, because both are players that can play solidly for you, pure scheme fits. They can do everything this defense that assets linebackers to do everything across the board. They can do it within. They're on cheap contracts, sort of prove a deal kind of contracts. Neither are tremendously old. Both have played recently good football. I think that those are two guys, if you're talking about outside guys. I know Leonard Williams is kind of inside, but he's kind of a trade outside too a little bit. But those would be the three. The linebackers are good though, man, because they're legitimately good. They legitimately fit the scheme, and they legitimately mean that you're not having to necessarily reach for a guy in this draft at one of those two linebacker positions because you didn't deal with it in free agency. So those do kind of hit the trifecta on it. I do like the Williams one though, just because I think it's so hard to find. It is so hard to find these really, really, really good 3-techs. They're kind of a special kind of gold in the NFL at this point, and their value only seems to be raising, John. The linebackers are in there at number 2, and outside wise, I guess that's the best there with that. You like Henry with the Ravens as an outside free agency? I certainly like it from a value standpoint to the Ravens at 2 years and $16 million. And it does seem like the running backs this year collectively across the board, we're not waiting to get paid. All of those guys jumped on the contracts they could get, be it 3 years, $24 million, 2 years, $16 million. And Henry last year just didn't at times have the blocking. I don't think that he necessarily showed that he was going backwards at this point as a player. I'm looking through the signings right now to give you a good one here. It's a good question, actually, as I look through these signings. There's ones that I'm like, I'm not feeling that. There's a couple others that are okay. I think the Queen signing with the Steelers at 3 years and $41 million, him coming under where a lot of people thought he was going to be at, I think that's a pretty good signing for them. That's a team that knows linebackers, and I don't think they're going to tend to throw money like that at somebody that you can't play, and I think he can play. It's still a very young player that they're getting at 24 years old there. He would stand out to me, I think. I like the Christian Wilkins signing to the Raiders. There's a team that doesn't tend to get this kind of player, and best defensive tackle on the market. Yeah, they paid the high price for it, but helping to get Max Crosby some help on that defensive line, I think, is huge. Huge. Some of these other ones I'm not big on. I don't like the Calvin Ridley move. I don't like the Falcons move. Not a fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars move for Davis. Just kind of see some funny money spent, John, this offseason a little bit that didn't always add up for me a little bit on some of these deals. But the Henry ones, definitely look at some of those other running back deals, to your point, that were given out. I mean, 4 years, $48 million to Jacobs, and the money they got paid out to Saquon. I had to go in and get Henry in a 2-year, $16 million deal. It's like, if you're going to ask me which of those 3 contracts I'd take on for the player, it's like, I'd probably take that third one on too, John. That's pretty pricey money to spend on running backs like that, especially backs like a Jacobs that has a lot of similar ways, a lot like Henry has had so much of his tread taken off his tire. What's up, Jose? Jag Sports Talk with Jose Rodriguez in the house. How you doing? A banana, the bad guy Williams. I like what the Seahawks have been doing so far. Do you think that Seattle will trade down and get more picks? I think a lot of Seattle will be gone. I do think that John Schneider is leading into this draft banana with an intention to try to trade back at least once and maybe twice in the first round especially. I do. And many in the chat seem to feel very much the same way on that one. Emerald, do you see a trade before the draft for the Hawks to grab more picks? I'm not a fan of trading Lockett or DK. Definitely don't think you're trading either of those two guys. DK carries just way too much dead money to do that. And with Lockett restructuring his contract and being a good soldier in that aspect of things, I don't think the team would trade him after having done that. Woolen becomes the only guy that I've been a little bit unsure on about a potential guy that could be traded on this roster, Emerald Hayes, that I wasn't quite sure of where McDonald would stand with him. Julian Love is another guy, especially with the Kavon Wallace signing today. Is he a guy that remains where Seattle could save a little bit of money moving on from him? Could they get a pick for him? Could they move him for a 5th round pick, for instance? Maybe. Those would be two guys, I think. There's not a lot of other guys, though, that I see as being potentially in that range. Trey Brown, maybe. Big Docs, Brandon, yeah, I think Schneider had to keep Taylor because we need depth at edge. If we use 16 on something other than a great edge, not sure who our depth edge pick will be. Yeah, not sure if we get in the later rounds. That gets hard to pick out. Gary says, I still don't understand what general scheme we're going to be running. Is it 4-3 or 3-4? So I hardly understand where our edge rushers even are going to fit in. It's the scheme originally back in the early foundations of the days of this defense. If you go far back in McDonald's history to where this defense was built from, it was originally built from the 3-4 foundation. It's changed. It's a lot of the carrying the what we call the what I've often called the 2-man front has been what's the new change into this 3-4 defense. You will have times throughout the year where there will be 3-4 looks incorporated. But you will see majority of the time them in the 2-man fronts with the outside linebackers and wide 9 technique, kind of like how we were trying to run it. You've got to run it very specifically. You can't just put the scheme in and be like, make it happen, players. It requires a lot of finer tuned details getting right, and guys having to use a little bit of their noggin when they're playing. But it's technically, to me, you can call it a 2-man front or a 4-man front carrying, but it's not a 3-4 anymore because you're not getting 3 down linemen more often than not. You're getting the 2 inside. So if you look at the Ravens and you turn on their defensive scheme last year, carrying, more often than not, you're getting 4 down linemen when it's all said and done. Snap after snap, that's what it's. You might have stacked fronts. You might have times where you will see 3-4s, but more often than not, it's going to be just kind of a 4-man front. Sometimes those guys on the edge will be standing up. Sometimes you'll have one edge standing up, one guy with his hand down in the dirt, or, Clowney would have his hand in the dirt, Odafe would have he'd be the stand-up guy. But it'll give you a lot of different looks too. That's the other thing with it. It gives you a variety. Emerald Hayes, Kobe Bryant could have a breakout season with McDonald at the helm. It's possible, man. Interesting to see what they do with him as far as positioning. Does he go back to corner, safety, slot? Chris, Dwayne Carter for defensive tackle. I like him, Chris. My comp to him is he's kind of like a Jaron Reed as a pass rusher. He just kind of works his way around that edge, and he will eventually get there if you give him enough time. Not necessarily, the quick twitch kind of guy, like some of the other defensive tackles, like a Leonard Taylor out of Miami from the 3 tech. He's a solid player. I think probably 3rd, 4th round for him. I don't know if he gives you a whole lot as a run defender. Eric says, I'd love to see more man coverage this year. I would too. And there is a background to this with Mike McDonald. Last year, the Ravens played Eric way more zone. But part of understanding why they're playing so much zone is also to understand McDonald's methodology of approach and also the problems that had been occurring with the Ravens prior to McDonald coming on board. Because what happened was Martindale wanted to run blitz-heavy schemes. He wants to send the house, casino blitz after casino blitz. But then he doesn't have the man cover corners on the outside to hold up in those moments. Or he'll have his number 1 and number 2 corners on the outside to hold up. They'll get injured, and then his 3 and his 4 can't do the man cover stuff on the outside, and so they get torched by cornerbacks because one-on-one is where it all kind of breaks down and boils down to at that point. What McDonald's scheme allowed for was you to be able to still be able to incorporate the stack fronts and play in some of the blitz game, but then you could do more of the zone stuff to where you could protect those corners a little bit more because he didn't necessarily have the corners that he could lean on, and so that's where you have to really appreciate in Mike McDonald's approach, where it's not one that's based on, here's my playbook, here's my scheme, we're going to run my scheme, and here we're going to run my playbook. But it's about, okay, what do you do as a player? What are your skills? What are your pluses? What are your minuses? How do I put you in that position for success? So he has the fluidity of going between zone and man, and looking at both Witherspoon and in Woolen last year. It absolutely stands out to me that, those guys, I think not only were those guys really good in zone. I'm going to try to see if I can actually find this. Thought I had it maybe saved in my bookmarks here on Twitter. I'm going to try to find it out if I can find it out. But they were not only just like decent in this mode of things, but they were two of the better corners in all of football in man coverage situations last year. So it really, really, really did stand out. And I do think that Seattle would be smartly pressed to try to lean into that again. Let me just find it here real quick. I shouldn't say real quick on anything. I'm trying to find. I got so much. I'm not a good organizer. I'll find it for you guys at some point. But pretty interesting little stat showing what those guys can do. Is this it? Oh, here we go. Look at that. Have faith. Have faith, my people. My people. Have faith. Okay, let's see if we can find this thing here. Sorry, bear with me. I promise you guys this will probably not be worth it. Here we go. Boom. All right, let's make this big. All right, so completions above percentage. These are some geeky stats, by the way. Completion above percentage on the lower hand column there, right? And then you've got the left column with the EPA per play, quarterback efficiency. Wait, no, this isn't the right one. That isn't the one. Wait a second here. Sorry, guys. Where in the hell is this thing? Oh, must be down here. There we go. Okay, so Reek and Devin Witherspoon are two of the best man cover corners in the league, yet Pete has our defense running man less than 20% of the time. And just another, why does not Pete have a job right now? So again, kind of a geeky chart. Yards per target allowed. Forced incompletions. And you can see on the top left part of the chart here where it says cornerback man coverage analysis, right? So there's a lot going on here a little bit. But you can see here with the red marks there underlined with Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon over. Just think of it like this. In the top, you want to be as a cornerback with this chart in the upper right-hand column in your man coverage skills. If you're over on the left side or you're the bottom left side, you're sucking hind tit. So Witherspoon and Woolen being up as far as they are, if you look around at some of the names around them there, right? Amari Taylor, Sauce Gardner, Jalen Johnson, AJ Terrell, Joey Porter, some pretty good company in there around them in these names being mentioned about man coverage and being very adept in man coverage situations. So I think there's going to be a draw for Mike Macdonald to lean into a little bit more of this. It's in the framework of the foundations of his defensive understanding of knowledge, meaning this is where he comes from defensively. We'll run man. We'll run that bare front defenses at the offense all day. We'll make them uncomfortable. We'll trust our corners to hold up on the outside. You got the corners that can hold up on the outside, man. The itch to do that, the pull to go and do that, I think is going to be very, very strong. Not for sale. Thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that. Not for sale. Sup, Brando? Who should we draft at 16? I say offensive line or defensive line. Well, not for sale at the start of the show today. We did a little bit of a look of where I see the updated situation going at as far as, as far as our current kind of where the lay of the land sits now as we get through the other side of free agency, right? Where these teams are sitting at, what they're considering in the draft, what they're likely to do. So I'll bring this up here, and I'm not for sale. I'll go through it a little bit quick here. There's some expanded thoughts on it at the top of the show. But I do want to address your question, of course, on this. So when we look at this, and I'm kind of speaking in shorthand a little bit on this where you can see what I'm... Whoa. Hold on. I was freaking out here. Okay, so we've got Chicago taking Caleb Williams here at number 1 overall pick. The next 2 picks will probably go quarterback. Is it Daniels May? Is it May Daniels? Who knows? Let's just call it May Daniels. 3 quarterbacks, first 3 picks. Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to Atlanta at 4. The Chargers trade back with Minnesota. Minnesota gets J.J. McCarthy. The Chargers trade back to 11. Still picking in that top period on that. The Giants take Malik Neighbors out of LSU. The wide receiver, Joe Alt, goes to Tennessee. Atlanta gets Dallas Turner or Jared Verse here, not for sale. So Dallas Turner or Jared Verse, whichever they may have a preference for, but I think they do need an edge. Olu Fashanu goes to Chicago to give them their left tackle of the future. Troy Fatano goes to the Jets, now that the Jets just signed a 1-year, $15 million deal to the former Charger wide receiver, I think yesterday. The Chargers move back to 11. They take Fuwanga out of Oregon State, so not for sale. You can see we've got a little bit of an issue there with the run on offensive linemen here ahead of us. Then I see Penix Nix going in the next 2 picks, 12 to 13 with Denver and Vegas. Romo Dunzier going number 14 to the New Orleans Saints. And then I have the Colts taking Brock Bowers. So not for sale. That then leaves us at a place where we have, I think, a couple of different options here. If the Chargers, instead of going with Fuwanga, take right tackle Arthur Mims, then you have Fuwanga available to you here at 16. If the Chargers take Fuwanga, then you have Mims available to you here at 16. I then think the other player that becomes very tantalizing at that point, let's go back to that Atlanta pick with Turner, right? So if it's Turner or Verse there, you get the inverse. So the bottom line to your question, I believe here, not for sale, is you're picking between either A, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, or B, one of those two, or Fuwanga or Mims, or Latham. You could throw Latham in there too, not for sale. I don't think defensive line interior is going to make sense because the value isn't there. I've got a 2nd round grade on Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat, Jerzon Newton. There are other guys there that you have a 1st round grade on. You would, I think, go with one of those guys instead at that point. But right tackle, man. Right tackle is going to be very potentially the one that stands out, if not edge. Thank you, though. The donation. I appreciate you for that. Niblack says Vikings' best free agent move, not signing Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million deal. I definitely like the Vikings not making that move from their standpoint of things, and I think that's, yay to them with that. I mean, good for the Vikings. I will say that I don't know if there's another team that I've liked least the amount of moves that the Vikings have made outside of that in free agency. Jonathan Greenard, 4 years, $76 million deal. Blake Cashman, 3 years, $22.5 million deal. Sam Darnold, a 1 year, $10 million deal. They lose Daniil Hunter, which that's fine. He's got his injuries issues there. Andrew Van Ginkel, 2 years, $20 million off the edge. I think the Vikings have made some strange signings. But I agree with you. They shouldn't have spent that money on Cousins either. Nublack's Williams was a number one priority for me. Who was even the last defensive tackle we've had that was so good? Him and Witherspoon, 2 best players on D last year. Yeah, to your point, where would you go back to have to do it? I mean, you could say maybe Michael Bennett, but Michael Bennett always did a lot of his damage off the edge. We're talking about a pure defensive tackle. Maybe Brandon McBain, but certainly Williams and McBain are kind of 2 different players too, because McBain was more of a 1 tech than he is a 3 tech. But yeah, it's been quite a while, man. I'm with you. That's why I consider it that priority in the same vein. Is it's hard to find these kind of players. They don't grow on trees. Nublack says Josh Jacobs on the Packers could be massive. He was so good 2 years ago. I don't hate the move, by the way, for them on that. It's just a big risk swing to me. Worried. I'd be a little concerned on making that move. He's at 1,300, so yeah, he's about right now 1,500 total touches in his pro career. He's only 26 years old. But the thing to also look at that is that he also had an additional, I guess he wasn't used that much at Alabama, was he? Wow, okay. So I thought usually those Alabama backs come out and they're like, ooh, look out. But maybe that's why the Packers feel a little bit better about that one, because he wasn't used that much at Bama. He only had a little over 200 carries at Bama in 3 seasons. And he is only 26 years old. So I can't get mad at that either. I think it's not a bad move on that. I thought he was one of those, those Bama backs go. Saban would run him into the ground with like 2,900 carries by the time they're coming out of college. Emerald Hayes, Colson, Trotter, or Eichenberg? Colson all day, Emerald Hayes. Trotter a bit behind him, and then Eichenberg way behind them. And Seahawks Gaming, Daniel Hunter, there's no denying his talent, but I just worry about that back. It seems like it just randomly flares up. Kieran says, I feel bad for Justin Herbert in LA. Got rid of the only guys who caught passes for him the last couple of years. Yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen's getting old, and they were running into it with that cap situation where they were going to have to do something with the cap. The other guy, Michael Johnson or whatever his name is, the kid that they took out of Clemson and gave money to, he's always injured. So it's like he's bare, and Allen's gotten his share of injuries too. So, I mean, from their perspective, and if I'm Harbaugh, I probably would have moved on too. Because I just go, they can't stay healthy and getting older, and they're expensive. It makes it pretty easy at that point. And they're really good players, but I think you can start to, especially with this draft, carrying, you come away with 2-3 guys in this draft and have reset him up and reloaded him up perfectly fine for the future. Especially because carrying that will be a team that leans into running the football. Harbaugh teams are not going to necessarily need to be pass happy attack, or won't be pass happy attacks. Ricardo, I like Darren Jones' run the playoffs too. He's a fun player, right? And he really came back off that injury shot out of a cannon. Phil Deb says, just moved from Sacramento to Seattle. Got to get up to speed with the Seahawks. Where do the Seahawks stand with regard to cap space? It's a bit unsettled exactly on where they're sitting with cap space right now because of the fact that we're waiting for some of these contracts to come through and give us, the final kind of view on things. We're at about approximately $17, $18 million in cap space, Phil, right now, but you have to put aside $9 million for the draft and about $6 million for reserve during the season. So you're sitting on a couple $1 million of actual functional cap space as it stands right now. Gary says teams always do something stupid, trade up in a desperate attempt to close a hole no one sees coming. Like no one had us grabbing Witherspoon, for instance, last year. Yeah, there's always someone doing something silly. That's true. 100% the truth. Phil, welcome to Seattle, man. Glad to hear you're able to get out of Sacramento. Well, hand grenades is a bold statement. No quarterback goes before 5. That'd be funny. And yeah, Phil, we are eating a little bit of dead money this year. So that's why I think, even though we haven't given out a lot of contracts, why we were kind of a little pressed up against it. Mr. Dog Hawksnest, which signing are you most excited about this offseason so far? Well, Leonard Williams is probably the one that I'm most excited about, Seahawks gaming. I think it's more than being about the individual signings. It's more about the Hawks properly recognizing where they are right now. We've been a team a little bit in that quasi go for it mode over the past couple of years, when our roster in retrospect really wasn't ready and the team wasn't really ready. I am much happier to see a team this year more willing to hit that reset button much more firmly. We're not going to spread the Jamal Adams dead money so we can create that extra $10 million for this year. No. We're eating all the bad dead money now. So, you're sort of ripping the Band-Aid off fast this offseason. And that may make it a little bit harder next year to make things cook and go, Mr. Dog. But I just like that approach. I'm a very big believer in that a lot of where the root problem comes at for many NFL organizations in their failures and going down the wrong road is that they misidentify where their team, where their talent is truly at. And that's as much of an important thing, I think, to do in the NFL as anything. And the Hawks have done that. But Williams, getting that guy in here, studying the defensive tackle position over the past couple of years, it has become the position that has elevated. Quarterbacks get a lot of print, receivers get a lot of print, edges get a lot of print for their value really elevating. But right along with those, the defensive tackles are keeping pace. And that means you can't look at them like running backs or middle linebackers or safeties. You've got to understand that you have to pay the going rate if you want the going guy to actually get you that impact there on the line that you're looking to get. Not just a guy, not just a jag, but an actual guy down there that can go make it happen. Ricardo says, that stat's weird because Pete used to love to do man defense with Sherman. No, Ricardo, we ran cover 3 95 to 96% of the time Richard Sherman was here. And that might be actually low on my numbers. Richard Sherman has probably played man coverage in his life about 30 collective snaps over his career. He's not the man coverage guy. Off coverage, cover 3. Press, cover 3. Red A's, Fatano at 16, Colson and Zinter in the 3rd. Not sexy, but I'd be happy. I'd take it, man. I'd take him and have a big old Joker grin on my face. Red Ace. Let's go. Chris says Colson will be gone by the time our 3rd comes, I think. Trotter could be there still. Yes, I agree. I think he's in the 2nd round at some point taken. Him and Cooper will both be gone in that point, Chris. I think even Trotter has the potential of going in the 2nd round, especially because I don't think there'll be any middle linebackers that go in the 1st. This is where we come back to, too, Chris, that whole importance behind maybe the potential of needing to trade back back in the first to get that second round pick back. Red Ace, what's our updated draft capital? So it's a bit murky because of a couple of these contracts still need to hit in to get the final outlook on where things are at. But it is approximately about $18 million. But again, that's the $9's got to go to the draft picks. $9 million is allotted to them. $6 million has to go to the in-season reserve fund, right? You lose a guy for a season, you need to sign a guy off the street. You need that extra money there to go get that. You want to go make a trade. You want to have some of that extra reserve money in there if there's a trade to be happening because there's nobody on the street to sign. So yeah, we're about $2 to $3 million about really in functional cap space as it stands right now. It's a little lean. Kieran says, I respect the draft, a thought process that goes into mock drafts, but time and again, I mean, talk to Mel Kifer. The actual drafts actual drafts always go effing sideways in a few picks. It doesn't happen, you think. I don't know. There's definitely been times where when you're getting trades, it sends things into that place, Kieran. I've had a couple of these doing draft day streams where, and I look at it a little bit like getting to these mock drafts is a refining process, and that you're getting hopefully closer and closer to the mark by the time draft day comes. I think I had a draft a couple of years ago where I got something like 28 out of the 32 players that were taken in the first round in my mock draft. Did I get the exact order? Maybe not, but did we get the exact players by the end? Yeah. And I would reckon a guess, Kieran, that by the end, by my final mock draft, you're going to see my mock draft probably end up having at the very least 25 to 26 of the players taken in the first round in my mock, where there is some of this that I think can be predicted a little bit. You're right about there being a bit of chaos there, and nothing's ever going to get perfectly right. But there's also, I think, in looking at this process, the more you work on it, the more you look at it. It's kind of like they say, Kieran, when people have studied out on the boards in retrospect and looked at versus these individual guys and the boards they run versus looking at the collective and who gets it more accurate and who gets it right. Well, the collective power gets it right more than a Mel Kifer or Daniel Jeremiah in their final outlook of the mocks. Because you have all that collective brain power you're kind of working off of a little bit. It's what I've said about this place a little bit, like us being a think tank like that. And that being part of what helps to inform me on putting together my mock drafts and where I think things will go. And I think that in that collective brain power, you can find a bottom line kind of final answer there that maybe individual pundits or draft analysts can't normally, see. Teams always do something stupid, though. You are right about that. Sean Proper says, good debate. Stay at 16, possibly get one blue chip player or trade down, get a second or third, or two good players. It's a great question, Sean, and I think the way that you delineate the question is the proper way to look at this, in my opinion. It just is my outlook. I mean, not proper way, but everyone's going to have their different outlook. Like you say, it's a good debate. I've got 10 guys, about 10 players in this draft, Sean, that I have as blue chip, as you say, quote unquote, blue chip prospects. Star potential, all pro level potential players. There's 10 of them. If you're at 16 and can get one of those 10 players, I think you've got to jump. If one of those 10 blue chip players is not there, then you're in tier 2 of this draft, Sean. And if you're in tier 2 of this draft, it's my belief that because of the NIL money impact last year, pushing a lot of prospects into this year's draft who would have normally have come out, we would have maybe have thought that elongated out the blue chip prospects from a normal 10 to 20. It did not. But what it did elongate out is the tier 2 range of things. Picks 11 to about 65, 70, 75 are all players all in a very similar range of potential, in my opinion. And so if in your question, Sean, you get to 16, there's a blue chip guy, grab him. If you get to 16 and you're into just pure tier 2 and you can move back and end up in a scenario where you go from getting 2 potential players in tier 2 to getting 3 potential players in tier 2, I'll take the 3 potential players in tier 2. But the blue chip guy sliding to you is that's the Uno reverse card in the situation. And I just take the picks and smile and call it a day at that point. Williams and Cedric Gray. How about North Carolina? I like him. He might end up fitting a little bit better as a will in the grand scheme of things. Very good coverage linebacker. A little bit light. Definitely part of this new breed of 225 to 230 pound guys, but really, really good zone dropper. Really smooth and quick in space. Laterally, really nice. Can run with a lot of players. Not maybe as rugged and aggressive in the run game, and that's why I don't think maybe his future will be as much at the Mike Williams and more of probably kind of a Will. But I do have him right now currently with a, what do we got, like a late third round grade on him right now would be my outlook for him. Good player. You need middle linebackers that can cover in this day and age. Williams says how many comp picks for next year? It would appear right now like 4. It would appear 4. You'll get I think it'll be like a 4, 5, 6, 7. He says, speaking of Bama running backs, reminds me of another missed opportunity by Littlefinger, not drafting Derrick Henry to replace beast mode. I don't know if we would have provided Derrick Henry as good a place if we'd gotten him here, Huey. I think to me, Derrick Henry's running style is based upon a little bit of having those early holes opened up so he can get up to speed. And then once he gets up to speed, good luck. But, with us having very little opening up front as far as our offensive line creating much holes for any of our running backs over the last few years, I don't know. He would have had probably to deal with a lot of early penetration into the backfield. And, he didn't have that kind of lateral slide like Kenneth Walker where it's like you can get hit in the face right after the carry and just kind of bounce it outside. He's a great back, one of the best backs of this generation, no doubt. But I also think that there's a big part of Henry built up to where it's like you got to make sure he's not hit within the first 3 steps of getting the ball after a handoff to make sure that he can get up to his best state on a given play. I think here he would have gotten schwacked. Sean says, Hawks Nest, does it seem Pete Carroll held us back by keeping his favorite players that weren't contributing? But like actually having true nose tackle in Hankins instead of Reed, that isn't his true position? I don't think that that's the case, Sean. No. Jaron Reed played really good. The thing with Jaron Reed, Sean, going back to this is Jaron Reed was a nose tackle coming out of Alabama. You moved Jaron Reed to 3-tech when he showed you he had some pass rush, but 3-tech was not his natural position. He went to the nose tackle last year and he started out and played really well in the nose tackle. He wore down over time because you played him way too many snaps for a guy that was over 30 years old who's played as much football as he's played. So you just kind of, that was why the play didn't kind of hold up as well over the year, but he actually was good for you initially in the nose tackle position. He definitely wasn't a problem for you, I think, on that line last year. And nose tackle is, I think he's, Sean, way more of a natural nose tackle than he is a 3-tech, in my opinion. Do I think that there's players that we've kept over the years and we've gotten a little bit into that game of playing a little bit too much of the loyalty game rather than trying to go out and look on the open market? Like we're, to your question's point, a little bit too of like, are we rewarding our own guys a little too much there? Yeah, I think that there's a place that you over reward. Coach Carroll comes in and your worry when Coach Carroll is when it goes wrong. When it goes right, he's got a locker room galvanized. He's got an environment and an atmosphere that is cooking. He's got players bought in. He's got guys running, playing fast and free on the football field. He's getting the best version of everybody out there. When it's going wrong as a player-friendly coach, it's guys kind of running this, they're sort of running the building a little bit, and they're kind of going hog wild a little bit, and guys aren't feeling held accountable to a standard as much, and that they can just kind of do their own thing. Did it maybe kind of slide into that worser range at the end? Yeah, maybe so there a little bit with Coach Carroll in the end of that. But you got the upside on it too with Coach Carroll too, with the winning and the greatness and the teams he put together in 10 years ago as well. But I think his issue is more, Sean, too. It comes down to me, it's less than even just the loyalty of the players, is more of just the lack of adaptation on both sides of the ball as far as the scheme goes. The thinking that you can kind of continue to do the same stuff you've done for years in the same way, and you don't have to change, you don't have to evolve. It's kind of like it's cylindrical. It'll eventually come back around to your stuff working again. I think that ends up becoming the thing that stands out as much as anything is the big issues at play here. Mo Maggot says, Brandon, what do you think Reek or Taylor would go for in a draft trade? I'd be eyeing second round from Dallas or Green Bay. I believe worst case scenario, we trade number 16 for first and a second to Dallas or Green Bay. Yeah, I think your latter scenario with Dallas and Green Bay is certainly, I think, something in play. The Green Bay one has kind of stood out to me with the John Schneider Green Bay connection that exists there, with them having a past history of even trading Mo Maggot in the first round, right? I mean, they were the team that moved up to get Darnell Savage at our pick in the first round a few years ago. So that's definitely on the table as a play to make. You move back to their slots, it's worth about a second round pick. Boom, bang, bing. You're still picking in the first round. With Reek Woolen, I think the best value that you get back for him is going to be about a mid-third round pick. With Darrell Taylor, I think the best that you could hope to get back from him is probably a 5th or 6th round pick at best. I think the league is very well aware of the fact that he doesn't play the run, and he's only really got the 1 year of efficient pass rushing, being not last year, but the year before. So I don't know if he's even able to really bring that to the table for a team that looks at him and goes, well, he'll give us some good pass rush. It's like, it's streaky. He doesn't have a lot of moves he can call upon. He's just going to kind of get around the edge. I don't know if there'll be a lot of value there for him. But with Reek, it could be a third. Brian Blank B, do you see any current talent on the Hawks being potential trade bait? I think Woolen and Love are potentially in there. Kavon Wallace comes in now, and maybe you feel like you can get something for Love. That's where you sort of end up buying a draft pick, because you would have been fully willing to rock with Love moving into next year, but maybe a team comes at you and says, hey, we'll give you a 4th or 5th round pick for Julian Love this offseason, and then you go to Kavon Wallace and go, okay, we'll go with Kavon Wallace, and he can give us a similar play to what he got, and we got the 4th round pick on the other side. It's kind of, that buying a draft pick a little bit, so to speak. So those guys are in play. Trey Brown, I don't know if he's as much a fit to Mike McDonald's scheme, so that could be a guy that stands out. I don't know if Darrell Taylor's we were talking about here has much value in a trade anymore at this point, but certainly I think if any kind of offer came down for John, he would probably jump on it. I think that if the team were to trade or pick up a Tavondre Sweat in the second round, I think that there's a really good chance that Jaron Reed would be a guy that you'd look at maybe moving in a trade. Not that they're looking to move him or actively trying to shop him, just that if the convenience factor pops up to make it happen, you would be willing to do it. But those would be about the only guys, and it would really be Brian, mainly guys on the defensive side of the ball more than anything else. Seahawks Gaming says, how did Daniel Jeremiah know in his last mock draft last season that the Texans were going to trade up to take Will Anderson? That was random. As Brian Myers says below on this one, Seahawks Gaming, you can never discount these guys that are former scouts who have connections to the league and that are covering football still for Football Network and doing all that type of stuff. I mean, these guys are definitely wired in, definitely wired in. So they have usually a few good nuggets in particular, like that one that they have come draft day. John Hines says, Hawks Nest, will the Rams trade up to get a defensive tackle to replace Aaron Donald? Very good question. I think they could look at Kobe Turner as being the guy who had a really good year for them last year, who could just slide over into that place. I don't think so. What stands out to me in this draft from the 3-tech standpoint here, Sean, is that there is a very nice collection of 3-techs right in about the second or third round. So from the Rams' perspective, if I'm them, and they could be looking at this, of course, differently than I look at it, but from their perspective, I would say, well, why go in the first round for a defensive tackle if we can come back in that second, third, fourth round territory and get him there? And I'm showing you right here, Sean. You can see this is my horizontal board here that I've got up on the screen right now. And what you notice there is the defensive tackles on the far left-hand side of the screen is you've got Zerzan Newton, Byron Murphy, Tyler Davis, Leonard Taylor, Mekhi Wingo, Michael Hall, Chris Jenkins, Braden Fisk, Brandon Dorless, Dwayne Carter, all guys second, third round range that are all 3-tech Sean's. So I think that they can find it from there and Kobe Turner and combo the two of those up and they'd be all right. Seahawks Gaming says, we were in our let Russ cook era. Derrick Henry would not have worked. Yo, Mad Bro. Hey, Brando. How's it going, man? Hi, how you doing, brother? I hear that the NFL is changing tackling rule again. What are your thoughts? Thanks again for all you do, bro. My pleasure, brother. My pleasure. And we are hearing rumors that the NFL is indeed going to do the cattle tackle, whatever they call it, the back tackle from the back. I don't like it. I think that they've already done enough to restrict defenses in the way that they can bring ball carriers down to the ground. I don't think they need to do more. But we're in the ever slow glacial move towards flag football, and we're going to get there sooner and later, I suppose. Pretty much you just have to tackle guys with the ends of your fingers. That'll be the next rule change that'll come through. But I don't like it. You got to give these NFL guys, these defensive players, a way to get it done. If you got a guy that grabs you from behind, you can go down instead of trying to fight hard forward and letting the guy land on your legs. That's the way a ball carrier can act about it as well. But I hate it. I don't like it at all. Emerald Hayes, Brandon, what are your grades for the current offensive line or defensive line? Defensive line? I'd put the defensive line at about a B. I would put the offensive line at a... I would put the offensive line at a C- right now. You don't have really a clear starter at the center position. Harris is fine, but he's real cheap. You haven't invested quality into the position necessarily yet. Bradford flashed for you last year, but wasn't consistent at all. You've got no left guards on the roster. I can't do it. I can't bloody do it. So they got to get that worked out for sure. He says, you're right about Henry, but his availability at the exact time Lynch left was kismet. Agree with you there, man. Totally agree with you there. And I liked Henry, so I do like him a lot. I liked him even coming out. And remember, too, the Hawks did meet with Henry. He was one of their official visits, I believe. As to whether we had the offensive line to benefit him, says Huey, don't get me started on that failure. Trying to trigger you tonight, Huey. That's all I'm trying to do, man. Get you triggered. Kieran says, B, hoping you get your mock draft order nailed, if only for the bragging rights. I know it was nice that year. I got 26 out of 32 because I think through the first 7, I got the first exhibit 7 perfectly right, and there weren't any trades in that draft, if I'm not mistaken, that first round. So it was like bang, bang, bang. I was like, I'm gonna nail this whole thing. But I like doing it too. It's a point of pride to try to see if I can get them right by the end. Ayush says, didn't the Packers trade up with us to draft Jair, not Savage? Could have sworn it was Savage, but I'm definitely getting old, Ayush. I might be misremembering it. There was definitely a trade of them in the first round with us moving up so they could get a guy. Seahawks Gaming, I love Julian Love. I don't think that they're actively looking to move him either. Just if there was a offer that came down or something like that, But I agree. I don't think that the odds are long on that one. O'Dwyer says, how long do you think the ownership will give John to right the ship? Probably a pretty decent amount of time. 3 years. I don't think you get the end of year 2 and you're like, okay, John, come on. Because there's going to be a bit of, I had to get this stuff corrected after Pete left to get this fixed. And that's going to take time. That's the whole point of embracing change. So probably 3 years. Big time, got to make some big time moves and changes over from where you were. And you got to give time for that to happen. Sean says, Hawks Nest, would you give a 4th round pick of this year's draft and a 2nd from next year's draft to get a 2nd round pick in this year's draft? No. Reason being, Sean, is that, though I have really railed against the just go get a quarterback folks, like I've been heavy on my pushback against those folks saying, like, look, this is not the end all be all answer to this. You are reaching the stage by next season that you've got to go make your quarterback move. And I don't think that 36-year-old Geno Smith is the guy, and I don't think Sam Howell is necessarily the guy, or that you can rely on those guys at this point in time where we stand. I think you've got to, if anything, Sean, set the stage to have more ammunition next season to move up in a draft if you're going to try to put together the continental package for one of these teams to go up and get yourself a quarterback. There'd be a draw to do it, Sean, but the quarterback thing for next year would have to be the overriding part for me. Tucker, this should be an easy move down for John. There is going to be a wide receiver, cornerback, or offensive tackle available at 16 that Seattle doesn't, but many teams behind them will desperately want. Very well said, Tucker. I think in particular, Fuwanga might go up ahead, but you might end up with a Mims and a J.C. Latham there at right tackle that a lot of people really, really do like a lot. Quinyon Mitchell might be the best cornerback in this draft, and he might be sitting there available at 16 when we pick, and some other team might be in that range of it, Tucker. 100%. Yeah, very well said. Momega says, Brandon, did you see what the new kickoff proposal being pitched Tuesday? I think I did like that one. Let me read this, double check it here. Kickoffs that hit the landing zone must be returned. Kickoffs that hit the landing zone and then go in the end zone must be returned or down by the receiving team. And they'll have to start from a standing still position. Kickoffs that go into the end zone and stay in bounds. Kickoffs that go into the end zone and stay in bounds that are downed would give the receiving team the ball at their own 35-yard line. So it sounds like they're trying to bring kickoffs back into the forefront here a little bit. I like that. I mean, the rule changes they've made on the kickoffs for a couple of years have reduced it down to nothing. So these would be rules to get it back to a part of the game, which I'm in favor of. I think it should be a part of the game. I don't think the safety stuff that was the reasoning behind pulling some of the rules back that they did in the first place made a whole hell of a lot of sense. Kieran says hip drop tackle. There's a big difference between a hip drop tackle and a tackle from behind, but that Baltimore tight end who broke his leg somehow defines a hip drop tackle, even though it's not at all. I think you just touched upon one of the reasons I don't like it is we're going to create this rule on that. Is there's this big little difference between it being legal, not legal, legal, not legal. And it's also just well, it's what do we want them to do? So I'm a 6-foot defender going up against a Mark Andrews who's 6'7" and 285 freaking pounds. And there's only so many ways to get that guy down. I can't trip him. I can't jujitsu him over my leg, right? So I gotta, maybe they should start letting that happen, I guess, DJ JF, I've been largely absent for the last week and a lot has happened. I need to catch up. Who do you see as starters from the free agents we signed? I think both the two linebackers you signed, Dotson and Baker, will be your two starters this upcoming year. I think if Julian Love doesn't get moved, then it's Julian Love and Rashawn Jenkins that'll be your 1-2. So Jenkins will be your strong safety essentially, but it's kind of free safety, strong safety. It's all kind of just semantics in this defense. As far as other guys, I don't think that there's any other starters that you got out there that you took at that point. Nick Harris is a backup center. Kavon Wallace is going to be your backup free safety. George Fant, backup swing tackle. Jonathan Hankins, best case scenario at this point with Hankins is he's your number 2 nose tackle. So only really the linebackers are your starters off of this one. DJ, it's good to have you back though, man. Ricardo says, I don't like the dropping the body weight on the legs. There's no way to tackle without doing that. You're in the boat I'm in with this, Ricardo. It's what do we want these defenders to do, right? What do you want them to do? We've made all these rule changes through the years to protect the poor old ball carriers. Defenseless receivers don't hit too high. Then they get the receivers and the tight ends that bitch and moan at you when you go low. Now when you try to hold them and gently bring him to the ground, that's not good enough. It's like, what are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? I'm with you. Gearing says the Geno Smith hip drop tackle was among the worst of the whole year, but it didn't result in broken legs, so no one cares. Yeah, that's true. That's true. My issue with that one was more too, just he was going out of bounds on that one than anything else, where, it was much the tackle, but just the timing of that tackle and the spot of where he was on the field. Nick says, I believe all those AFC teams would love to jump each other for a top wide receiver at 16. One of those top 3 guys drops, to your point, Nick. There may be a team that looks at Brian Thomas as a blue chip guy in this draft too, as well, Nick. And I could definitely see it. I think Seattle's going to be sitting in a very nice, it's really that you get 5 to 6 quarterbacks taken ahead of you at 16, and that puts you in that fine pole position for the team to move up from you, to jump up to your spot at that point, especially being that we really have a draw to move back, and that those two things come together between their want to jump up and get that guy that really could be a really great talent there that they didn't think would be available to them there, which gets them hot to trot to want to jump up, and your willingness to move back. Ricardo, the problem is officiating will surely F up the calls. Plenty of non-dangerous tackles will be called as hip drop by corrupt refs. Amen. We're putting more subjectivity in the rule book with this rule as well, which is not a good thing, as we've seen. The more subjectivity you put into the rules, the worse it gets, because there's too much differentiation between different officiating crews and how they're going to call it. Connor says, like 0 tech, I heard today 5 tech and 7 tech, 1 tech. So what the tech's referencing, Connor, is it's not really, it's a shorthand to reference a player, but it's more of their alignment, right, on the defensive line. That's what the tech is really referring to. A gap, B gap, C gap, right? And your techs kind of work off the gaps. So, your 0 tech is heads up over the top of the center. Your 1 tech would be slated over to the strong side of the formation and shaded between the center and typically the right guard, because most formations to the strong side are going to work right-handed. It doesn't have to be, but that's what then makes that a 1 tech, right, Connor? Why they named it this, why it goes 0, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I don't know why the NFL named it this way, because it makes it more confusing in trying to learn and understand it. But you've got your 0, your 1 tech. You've got your 3I, which is 3 tech to the inside shoulder. So the 3 tech is, Connor, going to be your weak side defensive lineman, who is then going to be aligned typically heads up over the left guard on the weak side of the formation, typically. If he's heads up, he's in a pure 3 tech role. If he's aligned to the inside shoulder, he's on 3I. 3 inside is his technique. So that's the technique he's playing. But a 3 tech is not going to go typically and be playing nose tackles. 0 and 1 tech is the same kind of, he's going to play the same kind of stuff, that kind of player. He's going to be your 350-pound Tavondre Sweat type. Your 3 tech types, they're the guys that are going to be more aligned out there to be kind of pass rushing defensive tackles. They'll be a little bit lighter, but they're going to be in that 3 mode. 5 tech, 7 tech, you're getting now more to the edges on that. And the more, think of it like the more you get, the higher the numbers, the wider out you would get in your alignment as an edge, Connor. The wider out it essentially goes. Emerald Hayes, where will Olatimi play? He's going to play center. He's got the inside track right now to start. Tucker says, moving down twice, can still easily get a defensive tackle, left guard, linebacker easily with the first 3 picks. In my mocks, I always trade out of the first and always end up with a defensive line, left guard, and linebacker with the picks in the 2nd and 3rd. Kind of similar to the way it's gone for me too, Tucker. And I agree with you. I think you can pull that off and make that kind of move happen. Sean, the Hawks Nest, if the Seahawks are able to get a 2nd round pick, would you grab Sweat to lock down the defensive line along with Uchenna, Williams, Mafe, Hall, Taylor, Hankins? I think if it comes down to, Sean, to the pick being between a Tavondre Sweat or a Junior Colson or Edgerrin Cooper, I would rather take the inside linebacker myself. And the pick, when I've done my mocks, a little bit like Tucker's talking about, when I do my mocks recently, you end up with a little bit of that pick in the 2nd round of, do I want to go Tavondre or do I want to go inside linebacker? And I like Tavondre, but I just keep coming back to rotational guy, nose tackle, versus an every down player in Junior Colson, who may be the best middle linebacker in this entire draft. I think the value is just better there with the middle. Calm Cow, do we actually have 0 left guards at the moment? I saw we didn't have much cap space left. Are we just drafting 2 left guards? Is that common? I don't know if it's the most common thing, Calm Cow. We tend to have a little bit of a strange outlook towards it, especially in tandem with some of the comments from John Schneider recently about the guard position and feeling like it's being a little bit overvalued across the board. I don't know, this Tremaine Archam guy we just signed, maybe a player down on the inside there, but yes, for all bottom line points here, we basically don't have a left guard right now at this point. So we're definitely drafting 2 as it stands. That's where this is going. IU says, yeah, Brandon just searched it up to confirm Packers trade up to 18 with us to take Jair Brown in 2018 when we really needed a corner. Oh, okay. Okay. So we did the Savage one too, Ayush. So we've done it twice over then. So we've moved up to them with Jair Brown. I just double checked it on the. So we did it in 18 to get them Jair Alexander, and then we did it in 19 so that they could get Maryland safety Darnell Savage. So then just more proof, maybe more kind of kerosene on this particular fire that there's a very good chance of potentially looking at Green Bay to moving up to that 16 spot we're at, and we move back to them at 25. Brian says Nick Harris may be a guard left, maybe an option left guard also. I was thinking about that, Brian, but boys, he is a legit 290. You know, in this day and age, you would like your guards to be more in that 320-ish range. Can he give up 30 pounds over there and make it happen? Maybe in a pinch on that, you know. Hey, Thomas, how you doing, brother? And that was the year we took Penny. And yeah, Thomas, I think most of the moves are done, and I think we're going to probably take guards in the draft too. Mike Morris, I'm excited with him too, Emerald Hayes. He's coming back in the mix. He might give them something. Interesting player down there. Thomas says, I heard rumors Oluwatimi has been working at the guard position. What do you think? Another guy that's really a little bit undersized there to be doing it out there, but I mean, he can do the movement-based stuff, you know. He has that in his game, so flexibility is never a bad thing, I suppose. I do think he is a pure center, though. Emerald Hayes, do I have any sleepers in the later rounds of the O-line? It's, you know what, that's the spot that I'm a little bit late in this hour. The offensive line has been the spot. I'll show you. It's just been the spot that I haven't necessarily addressed as many guys as I would have wanted to, right? So you can kind of see here as we get into the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, I don't have as many offensive linemen I've looked at yet. I mean, I've looked at a good amount of guys, but I haven't gotten into that mode of the late round sleeper guys that, you know, it gets in that, I'm in the slog point for sure. You know, guys are starting to run together, and it's, you get to that 230 prospects looking in, you kind of start to eyes cross a little bit, and it gets grindy. But I got to get to the offensive line. Those are the next ones that I need to really hammer in here on and start picking up. I need to start getting about the next 10 days. I need to knock out about another 30, 35 prospects here because I'm a little bit behind this year at this time. So check with me in another about 2 weeks or so. I'll have a better answer for you on that side. I use Brandon, just to clarify, they trade up to take Jair Alexander, not Jair Brown. I know. I might have said Jair Brown too. I know you meant on that though. Yeah. So they did twice, back-to-back years. They moved up to do that. We weren't the Jordan Love trade too, were we? No, that was they moved up the Dolphins. So we did do the Love, or we'd really be onto something, Ayush. Bortolini might be the one guy I'd say who could be a sleeper there. Emerald Hayes. Because if he's he may go higher in the draft, but if you jump to a 4th or 5th round, that'd be a guy definitely with his mobility, and he's played all 5 positions on the offensive line. Maybe Layden Robinson too as a 5th round guy. I got to look through more guys though. I'm behind. Yalin says, Brandon, John's use of the available cap space shocked you? I thought we were tapped out after the linebackers. No, I wouldn't say it shocked me. I wouldn't say it's shocking. I mean, I figured after we signed kind of the contracts we did on the opening night with Fant and Williams that meant that we were going to probably go with a lot of one-year deals. You didn't have a lot of rostered players at that time. You needed to get the roster filled out. You weren't going to be able to just rely on draft picks. No, I mean, it's pretty understandable what they're doing with it. They're all low-end veteran minimum deals, a lot of these contracts. Shotgun Diesel, what's your favorite player we signed this free agency? Probably Dotson. He's a young guy still. He just kind of has had to wait his chance to get an opportunity there with Buffalo to get out and play and show what he could do. He was stacked up behind Matt Milano and then Tremaine Edmonds, who was there the year before. So there's an understandable reason why he's not been yet out on the field prior to this year, providing, some kind of impact at that point for that defense. He's a fit for the scheme, and he can do all of what you want the linebackers to do, cover with a wide range and get back into spots and be able to move and be rangy. Solid enough tackler, really good blitzer. He can hide what he's going to do pre-snap to post-snap very well as well. So he's the guy on top of it's a little bit of a nod to their use and embracing, I think, a little bit of the analytics side of it. Because, of course, with Dotson, you have him as the top-rated linebacker by PFF last year, which, as I know many fans don't like to hear this, NFL franchises are putting a lot more value into the PFF systems and grading systems and how that's measured out. And I think that's to their smartness, so to speak. So that'd be the one Shotgun Diesel that I like, that I think is the one that stands out. I also do like the Williams signing in-house is probably, if we're talking about just the overall best signing that's not about getting an outside guy in, the Williams signing and keeping a guy in-house as good as him at the defensive tackle position, understanding how hard it is to find that position. Very smart on the Seahawks, I think, to understand that they needed to pay that price, because there's not a pathway to finding another player like that just right around the corner. Brian Meyer says, I really think picking 2 offensive line is a waste of draft capital, more spots to fill. Certainly John Schneider was talking about the fact he felt like guards were a little overrated. It does get hard though, Brian, when you don't have even a starter or backup at left guard as it stands, But I think that it is also tough when trying to go out there and buy those guys. You got guys like Robert Hunt going for $20 million a year, and you're going, oof, I guess we'll just have to draft it. Mo Baggett Yellen, Brandon, do you have a top 5 and bottom 5 GMs in the league? I haven't really thought about it, to be honest with you. I can tell you teams that I think do it well and teams I don't think do it as well. I certainly think before Bill Belichick left to New England, that was one of the worst general manager run spot locations that we've seen in the NFL recently. I think the Titans general manager, they've had a couple guys going through there. They've been very, very poorly run recently. Chicago would be on that mix. The Carolina Panthers, because of the ownership and incursion there, would be in that mix. And then I'd probably have maybe the Cardinals and Vikings tied at the beneath that, I guess. The Giants maybe also in that mix on the bottom. Those would be my bottom-ish general managers. Top-end managers, Howie Roseman obviously does, I think, a really good job out there. Kansas City Chiefs, can't argue with the work that they do. Fantastic job on their side of it. The Ravens general manager, I think DaCosta. I'd have John Schneider in there. And I would probably also put... I very well may put the Rams general manager in there as well, because of the job that he's done in picking through the middle rounds, on top of course, putting a Super Bowl roster together a couple of years ago. Certainly probably deserves to be mentioned too, because he's done some good work on his side of it. So that'd be my pluses and downs. I don't know the exact order would go. I'd have to think a little bit more about the exact order. Buyer B, Hawks Nest, how would you grade the free agent signings and spendings? I'd give it a solid B+, like an 89 on the paper, Brian. Less than it's being about the individual signings, Byron, from my perspective on this. It's more about allowing yourself to set the stage for this draft. It's like this, when it comes to the team building concept in the future, it comes down to some realities for me on this. The reality number one, Byron, is we're not likely to be a contender next year. Reality one needs to inform reality two and how we then spend our money this offseason. John Schneider let that happen. That's why you have so many one-year contracts. This year's not the go time, then this year's not the go time. And so more than it being about the individual signings, why I give the grade I do is he understood this year was in the place it was. He had to take the tactical approach he did. It's not an easy one to take, to say, okay, we're going to not only dive into free agency, but we're not going to hand out any of these real multi-year deals as well. But he still found a way, I think, to overall improve the roster. And he set the stage for this draft so he doesn't pick for need. And he preserved the 2025 season, Byron, to where now you can go for it at that point. You've not robbed from tomorrow for today. You've preserved tomorrow for tomorrow. And that will then, I think, provide them the pathway to not only allowing us to be a contender for 2025, but being able to be very aggressive in our approach to getting to that state. Thomas, I keep trading back to the mid-6 round in my mock draft. One of the best I've had is Bebe, Penix, Colson, and a Duke defensive tackle. It was BPA with value. I like it, man. It's good. That's a good, it's kind of similar to one I had. It's kind of funny, Thomas. I did a mock today that was a little bit of a trade back mock that was post free agency here a little bit. I moved back a bunch of times. I got a future second round pick from Pittsburgh in next year's draft, but I got the same three guys you got of Penix, Colson, and Bebe in my trio as well. Also got Zach Sinter in there too. John says, Hawks Nest, who's at fault for missing out on Creed Humphrey and getting Forsythe instead? John Schneider or Pete Carroll? I think it's the difficult question that gets asked that I don't think that there's really an answer that any of us know on this one, Sean. Coach Carroll was vice president from day one. Coach Carroll hired John Schneider. Coach Carroll had oversight over the top of John Schneider. We have no information, zero information, less than 1% information as to how the dynamic played out between those guys, as to who was the drawer in individual situations for individual players. Who pushed for the Jimmy Graham trade? Right? Who pushed for the Jamal Adams trade? Who pushed for the Sheldon Richardson trade? Who was the driver of taking Dwayne Eskridge over Creed Humphrey? Did Carroll even want Creed Humphrey? Was there even a choice on that match? These are all great questions. They are, Sean. The unfortunate part is that we're trying to provide answers in the dark in regards to it. I don't know for sure on that one. I've taken as a logical deducement that the fact that Coach Carroll has been moved on from, but that John Schneider remains, is probably an example of the fact that there was some interference coming from the coaching staff to the general manager in some of these major calls that were made, especially some of the major calls that were made that led to poor decisions. But I can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I can't even really supply a whole lot of proof to back it up, just because, again, of that darkness issue where no one's really reported on. We just don't know much about it. Phillips says late O-line guys, Crum, Kingston, Grable, Monk, and McMahon. Well, there we go. Got to look at all those guys. I don't think I've looked at any of those, especially Crum. Got to take a look at him. Connor says, Brandon, you the man. Who do you think is going to play fullback and goal line? Did Grub use one at UW? Max Strong is one of my favorite Hawks, if not my favorite. Not really. I mean, the H-back has basically replaced the fullback, Connor. And Max Strong's a great player, man. Great player. But the fullback is gone out of the sport. It's probably not returning anytime soon. And so what the H-back tends to do in an offense like Grub is that he'll tend to go in pre-snap motion. And a lot of the time then when on the snap, you have the snap occurring just as the tight end is getting to the hole that he's going to then be driving up to lay the second level block from, right? The linebacker clear block. So, before the fullback would go in front of the running back to that hole. Well, now I've got the tight end sliding to that hole pre-snap and then going through it at the snap where the running back then falls in behind him. The benefit of that is that if you do the fullback behind the running back and then you get it into the hole, is that you're giving the linebacker time to get into the hole to meet the fullback so that fullback might get a nice little block in there, but then everything gets really blocked up in there, right? There's no actual hole for the running back to get through. So if you allow that move tight end to come in motion and then get up the field, he's getting to the second level of the block before the linebacker can get downhill. And that's, I think, that's not the only reason, but just one of the reasons you see, I think, teams lean a little bit more to the tight ends on that role than ever before. But that's the way that Grub would use a tight end like a fullback. I don't think he really did much of, from the film I remember watching. You got a lot of shotgun stuff, even at goal line. I don't think he ran a lot of traditional I formation kind of stuff. Connor Wilson, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that, Connor. Nothing put there in as far as a note, but a very kind donation. Sean, thank you for subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you for doing that, Sean. Carter says, yep, John watched Moneyball one too many times. Maybe so. Maybe so. Thomas says, San Francisco's general manager is good. Schneider, the Packers general manager, Rams, KC, and Philly are the best general managers right now. Yep, those are all good ones, man. Lynch is pretty good. Lynch has got some misses too, but he does pretty good overall. Philip Castle, Delmar Gaze. I do like Delmar Glaze. I've had him, Philip, as a guy that I've had higher than other people have in their draft. So that's why I haven't put him as I need to maybe be including him as a sleeper, because I've had him put, I think, up in the third round or something, and others have got him more fifth, sixth, seventh. I might be totally missing the boat on him. Philip Castle says, apparently we got a couple of guys for development last year, Raekwon O'Neal and McClendon Curtis. McClendon's interesting, but they are kind of flyer guys, Philip. Maybe not. They give you something, Thomas, I think John plan was to go back to 2010 to a degree. He is going to sign and release, I don't know how many players in 2010, but this roster is close to 2011. Yeah. Agreed. Landon, I'm probably alone on this, but I like the Eskridge re-sign. If healthy, that's a big if, I think he can carve out a niche role in Grub's offense and the return game. I definitely think that the kid's got talent, Landon. I do think that he is also right now, to me, a little bit of the equivalent of Mr. Glass of the NFL, where there's some guys that just can't take the impact and hits. And the thing with him on this, Landon, is when it comes to Eskridge, the injury situation didn't just arrive for him like it kind of did with Rashard Penny when he arrived at the pro level. The injury history has been kind of following him all the way back to college. So when it comes to what he could bring on the field, I think you adequately put, look, he's absolutely probably your best kick returner, no doubt about it, on the roster right now. Might be able to give me a good punt return. He's got a unique ability as far as a yak player than other guys you have on the roster at the receiver position, including even guys I think like a JSN or certainly Tyler Lockett or Bobo. But the injury thing is one that does weigh very large in this case, not just small, but hugely, because of the fact that he's just been so up against staying in good shape. And when he gets injured, he tends to get injured for a very long time. Some guys get a concussion, they're out a week. He gets a concussion and he misses over half of a season. I don't know, man. I don't know why he can't kind of hold together, but I know it goes back to that college place. I mean, it was so bad in college, Landon. He changed his number in college just to try to change his injury bad luck in college. Is it going to right itself this next year? Maybe. And that potential is still there, to your point on that. But I have a hard time seeing him suddenly this year have the body kind of now maintain when it's just failed to do so for now so many years. Still a very good talent, though. Thomas says, have you looked at Eric All, the Arizona tight end, Sanders, and Penn State tight end? Yes. I've looked at all three of those guys. Jatavian Sanders is one of your more athletic receivers in this draft. He gives you a little bit of blocking. He's very good with the yak stuff after the catch with that athleticism. I want his hands to be a little bit better. He's not really explosive or really fast for the position. second round graded tight end. Theo Johnson is more of kind of a workout warrior versus what you see on the tape, but he's got some really good upside and a good all-around game as an inline guy. Let's see, you're talking about Eric All first. Eric All is Iowa tight ends, of course. Can't go wrong with those. He's a pass-catching classic H-back guy. He only put up 7 games last year, but still put over 300 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. He's really quick off the line, a little bit of burst up the field, fluid mover in space, dynamic with the ball in his hands, and he quickly turns into a runner after the catch, kind of like a running back with his pad level at times in the way he runs after the catch. He's got a weird issue, does Eric All, where he is always the last guy coming out of his stance, out of the snap. I don't know if he just takes him a second to register hike, but it's like they say hike and he's like, okay, now I'll go. I don't think that he gives you much as a blocker. Just doesn't seem to have very much power. Physicality throughout the course of the route can disrupt him. You put your hands on him, it's going to be a bit of a problem with him getting out and getting back up the field in a timely manner for his quarterback. I think he's workable as a strong H-back pass catcher type. As long, of course, as his health can hold up, as again, that seems to be a bit of an issue with him. He only played 3 games in 2022, 7 in 2023. But the lack of blocking does loom for me kind of largely with him. Tanner McClatchin, the Arizona tight end that you talked about, he's more of an inline guy with a minimal amount of burst, some build-up speed, but a real dogged, high-effort blocker who can get back, who can get after it in the run game and as a pass protector, as a blocker. Sometimes operates like a 6th man in pass protection, which is always really nice. So, at least you're getting that with the floor on Tanner. He does have a good slide and feel for where to sit down in zone, kind of one of those traditional tight ends where he's just going to look to find an open crack to kind of sit down into and then trust his ability to make a contested catch or with a guy kind of banging on him a little bit. Teams would tend to when they could disrupt his route as well, and it was effective. So another guy that does struggle with a little bit of physicality through the route, just doesn't have the natural athleticism to get around it. So he just sort of takes that right on the nose, so to speak, when he gets kind of chucked at the line of scrimmage. I don't think he's going to have the athletic juice to be taken anywhere but day 3, but he does offer an NFL skill set as a blocker, and that's worth some value. Can he be a kind of like a Pharaoh Brown that we took in free agency this year? Maybe so. And for very, very cheap at that point, being he's a day 3 guy. Yalin says, Brandon, are you worried that Grub's spread offense won't work with different hash marks and naturally tighter coverages in the NFL? No, because I don't think that it was as much leaning. I think spread concepts have found a home in the NFL first, Yalin. I also think that his particular brand of spread concepts are not as subjected as much as other spread concepts, like let's say out in Tennessee, to working off the far hash mark in a lot of what they're doing. That where you can feel offenses really leaning on that. I think Washington's offense was just as much willing to attack into the near hashes and do all that stuff. He's more about spreading the field out. And he's got markers built within the offense to where it's not as much that pure spread, work off the far hash mark college offense. His willingness to use power-based run concepts, his willingness to feature in shot plays down the football field, those things especially, I think, help to offset a little bit of the lack of the stretch of the hash marks, in my opinion, Yalin. Connor says, B, who do you think will be our H-back in those situations? Pharaoh Brown? Would be pretty sick to have George Fant there, but I'm not sure if that would work. Noah Fant is your H-back, Connor. There's times he'll play the inline role too, but when you have 2 tight ends on the field, Noah Fant your H-back tight end. Pharaoh Brown would be an inline guy for you. He would be your number 1 inline guy coming off the bench. Fant would also be lined up as an inline guy. You'd want Fant as close to the line of scrimmage off the ball as possible. The H-back guys are a yard off the ball prior to the snap. It's not impossible to use those guys in that role, but just I wouldn't think they would necessarily. Ricardo says, the Eskridge is loved by the offensive coaches. I wonder if we'll see more jet sweeps this year. I hope so, man. That's what he was supposed to do really well, and I think they've ran about 3 of them to him in his career. Holy Iron Grenade, you know what trope where someone sneezes when being talked about? That's D, but he gets injured. Exactly. Exactamundo. Thomas, I'm also a big fan of Jalen McMillan. I hope teams don't draft him until the Seahawks. If he wasn't injured, he would have been a top 20 pick. Definitely got the drops a little bit with the injury front, Thomas. It also doesn't help Jalen McMillan that this draft is so deep with receivers and gets him kind of lost in the sauce, doesn't it, Thomas? Especially you've got two receivers coming out of his college that are Romo going in the first round, and I think Polk is going to be high on a lot of people's boards and their outlook of him. So it's a little bit of hard luck for him, but maybe his loss our gain on that, to your point, if he does dip down in the draft. And I like his tape quite a bit as well. I've got a TJ Hushmanzada comp for Jalen McMillan. Jimmy Cruz, what's to say John does it again and drafts the best running back to keep from having to pay it back in the near future? And so I guess it's possible, Jamie. I think you're probably looking at single percentage points of a possibility of that happening, though, at this point. Thomas, I think Grub's offense will adjust. His offense is so close to what Miami does. They run the ball physically, but will enhance JSN, DK, Lockett, and running backs in Charbonnet, K9, and McIntosh. Well said, Thomas. I foresee the same thing. I think if it was, you see a lot of those teams offensively where in college they'll operate off that near hash and everything then pushes out to the far hash, and especially from the bubble screen game, once they get that space to the far hash of the field, and the offense gets so simplistic in its outlook and of it. With the Huskies, it was so hard to predict where they were going with the ball from side to side. Grub kept that very, very unpredictable. Phillips' only reason haven't been including Zinter and Bebe is they're a bit slower and more power run blocking guys. Pass blocker, more power blocking than type linemen. It's true. Zinter was asked to do some movement-based stuff, but I think your assessment is accurate of that one, for sure. Thomas says, plus the Grub makes adjustments. How many times have us fans wanted Waldron to do that? Yeah, so very many, my man. So very many. Well, Young Grenade B, when you get Hell Divers, let me know. I can add you. For sure, man. I'm going to get it hopefully here soon. So I've got to get it figured. I got to get my brother to get a computer now so he can get it because he's got only the Xbox. So I'm trying to wait till my brother can get a actual PC to make this happen. Now's a good time as ever to thank the sponsor of the show. Sponsor of the show today is going to be Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is sponsoring the Hawks Nest throughout the course of this year and has been doing so throughout the football season. You click the top, the link, description section below, and you go to the Underdog Fantasy site, use their code for the first time or my code NEST, and they will match you up to 100% of $100 of your first deposit. So $100 from me to you through the Hawks Nest by way of the Underdog Fantasy app, and you support the channel at the very same time. They got some great ongoing contests that continue through this offseason. Baseball, basketball, March Madness, hockey. What do you want to get into? They can get you into it. You want to go head-to-head against another fan? You want to go against the house? Well, however you want to do it, whatever you want to do it today with them. Utilize my code today. And as I said, get yourself $100 right back in your pocket for having doing so. Thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the Hawks Nest throughout this year. Great contests, and you can go win a ton of money still on their site every single day. Get into some daily fantasy. Thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring the Hawks Nest as you have. Jimmy Cruz, I do think 100% we will trade back, hopefully for a second and another third. I think that's been a pretty common feeling here in the chat today, Jamie, from the start to finish, is that people really, as we stand right now, feel very, very certainly that that's where John Schneider's leaning to want to make it happen. It takes a team that wants to trade up. It takes guys falling through the first round that provide those enticing trade-up prospects for those teams. But I think that it will play out in that way, and I think John will make that move, Jamie. I do. Yolan, thank you for a $5 donation. I really do appreciate it, Yolan. Very kind of you, man. Says, appreciate your time. I use your answers and knowledge to comment and engage with other NFL fans on different social medias. Oh, well, thank you, Yolan. Hopefully I help you stay on top of some of these debates that can go on out there, man. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I try to do my research in the background and know what I am talking about when I do speak to you guys on this stuff so that I'm not completely talking out of my back end. But I appreciate you for that. That's very kind of you, man. And hopefully everyone's wondering, like, where are you getting this information, man? Where are you getting this from? You know what I mean? What's going on? Call him Cal. Will I be doing a mock today? I did more of the mock kind of prior to the stream a little bit today. We'll do another mock though. I might actually have next Sunday's show be more of a let's have some mock. Let's go mock crazy or something. Maybe we'll just do a bunch of running some different mocks on next Sunday's show. The big trade back, right? The deep drop, the mini deep. The trading up even, maybe we'll try to go through every kind of perspective scenario on that one next Sunday. But I ran a current. This was my current one that I ran today just before the stream, which was I did a variety of trading back. I didn't end up selecting for the first time until the 33rd pick of the second round. I got Michael Penix Jr. I haven't taken a quarterback in any of these mocks, so I figured let's do one that was a little bit different. So I went with Michael Penix in the third round. I took Cooper Bebe then in the second round. Junior Colson also in the second round due to my trading back. I got Zach Zinter, Edifon Elefosio, who is your backup / maybe your will of the future there. AJ Barner, blocking tight end at 192. Dylan Johnson, figured I'm already heading down the Husky path in this draft. Why not just complete it on through Calm Cow? And then I also did get a future Pittsburgh second round pick for next year's draft, maybe adding up some draft capital for next year to potentially package a variety of picks up to maybe finally go get that quarterback of the future at that time. But I'll be doing maybe on Sunday we'll do the crazy Mocktown draft, and we'll go bonkers with it at that time. Go through all the scenarios, so to speak. Thomas says, I've been a big fan of drafting a quarterback, but Hal's tape makes me believe that he can be good. I think that if Penix, Rattler, or Pratt draft them, if they believe they have the tilt the field intangibles. Yep, I agree with you on that too, Thomas. And, if you look at it into next year, it's a very, very large amount of money, like $25 million that you can save off moving off the Geno contract. And so even if you were in a place of having Michael Penix and Sam Howell duking it out for the starting quarterback role, it would be tremendously cheap at that point, or a Rattler at that point, if that was the other way to go, Thomas, and a way to create a lot of cap space for next offseason to better, fuller build the team out then at that point. It's a path they could definitely go. But I'm with you in that I've watched a lot of the Hal tape. I think that a lot of the castigating him as being trash or not good enough, and everybody just going to these 21 interceptions or the sacks that he took is just the easy way out on the evaluation of him, I think, a little bit. And I think he does have some upside, still a young player. He's got a great NFL skill set that he brings to play. And I feel like that's I feel like that's going to be useful going into the future. And I think he might surprise some Seattle fans, Thomas, but we've been down this road with Geno Smith, right? Where everybody was in that same kind of boat with Geno saying, he is where he is what it is, it is what it is, he is what it is, he ain't anything more. And then he goes out there and wins Comeback Player of the Year award. So we've seen this play out before, and wouldn't surprise me in the least if it played out again. Calm Cow, I kind of want to see Mike draft at least 2 linebackers to really show his linebacker knowledge. People call him the linebacker whisperer. It's a good chance of it, Calm. Very, very, very good chance of it. I think at the very least you're taking one. And we've certainly seen recently that John Schneider has been willing to double dip in the drafts on a given position, and sometimes in a given draft, double dip twice in the same draft. So I think it's all about value. Is there the value of the guy to do that? We shall see. There was in my draft, as you can see on my mock draft, of course, in taking both Edifon Olufoso and Junior Colson and getting those 2 middle linebackers. The value was too good for me to be picking Olufoso, I think, in the 5th round at that point. But it's really all driven heavily by that. Bear with me 1 second here. Jamie, I see you got a donation here. I just need to get a little bit of water, so I will be right back. Whew. Jamie Cruz coming in with a $50 donation. I do appreciate you for that, Jamie. Very, 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 very kind of you on that front of things. Jamie says, "Go Seahawks." I'm excited that no one will know what we are doing on play calling. Our coaches are young and ready. Let's go. Hey, I love it, Jamie. It is certainly one of the funnest transitions that you can see in changing over this offseason. And that I think that on both sides of the ball, to your point, I think for many years now, we have been very highly predictable in what we are going to do. When you're a team that does not want to run to the edges, when you're a team that does not want to throw to the middle of the football field, when you're a team that does not want to blitz, when you're a team that plays a high propensity of cover 3 or cover 6, when you're a team that doesn't like to play man coverage-based principles, you start stacking too many of these items up and you start to become highly, highly predictable in your nature and how you are going to call a football game, Jamie. So these two things now switch and get turned on their head. You're now looking to operate and bring on board schemes that at the beginning point of what they do, before they get physical, before they are aggressive, right? Almost at the beginning point of their foundation is they're looking to be unpredictable, that you prior to the snap don't know what we're going to do. And we're going to be able to take advantage of that. We're going to be able to build upon the fact that you are going to have to wait to post-snap to be sure of what we do and where we're going to do it. And I think that was a big part of what was driving John and his outlook of the coaches he wanted to bring in here. I think that he sees a very, very large value in this because it's one of the true places that exists where you can create advantages for your players, built-in advantages for your players, rather than them putting the whole shoulder of the burden on their shoulders like Atlas and saying, carry that load for us. You be great on the field. Overcome our scheme to make this happen. Instead, you flip it the other way. And you go, man, we're going to set you up so you're already running downhill prior to the snap. And I think that it's going to bring about great returns for this team in the future. This is the place to find advantages in the modern NFL. And then to your point on that final part of what you said in your comment, Jamie, so many teams for so many years have been able to rely upon the predictability, the high predictability of the Seattle Seahawks on both sides of the ball. Those days are over. Your Seahawk playbook, your Seahawk beater plays for your offense and defensive schemes that you could call upon, you just dust it off every week you're going to play the Hawks. Just grab the same one that you had from 2015. No, it's in the back. Yeah, no, we just used that same one. We haven't had to update it for 7 years. Just the same one, man. I know. They haven't changed. No, they haven't changed. We can use the same one. But just blow the dust off. I know, we can use it every year. Yeah, I know, there's some coffee stains on it. It's okay. It'll work. And now this year, Jamie, they've had to take that book and dump it into the trash and say can't use any of that anymore. It all gets tossed out. And thank God for that. Because it means we stop getting beat in the same manner over and over and over again. We stop getting slowly bled to death on defense by the dink and dunk. We stop watching our A gap get completely just pig piled on at times because defenses don't feel like they have to protect the edges or the middle of the field. So I'm glad to hear your excitement, Jamie. I share your excitement with where this is going. The returns may not all fully be there by next year, but they will be here in the coming future. And I have a feeling in Mike McDonald, we've gotten ourselves a very smart young head coach, one of the young bright minds in this game that's out there, who's going to be able to get this thing right. He's going to go about it the right way. And they don't seem like they're trying to microwave this thing. They seem like they're trying to put it together in just the right time and the right fashion. But thank you so very, very, very much, Jamie, for the $50 donation. Very kind of you. I salute you and tip my cap to you. Very kind. Addicted to Hawks, says Brandon. Pumpkin, do the Hawks draft at 16 or trade down? I won't tell Brandon. Let's check with Pumpkin. She's looking firmly out the door right now, saying you've been streaming for a long time without giving me attention. So Pumpkin, are the Seahawks going to trade down? Are they going to trade down? How many times? How many times are we going to trade down? Huh? 2? 2 times? She said 2 times. She's got a psychic 2 times? She's very tired. It's been a very long, exhausted day of napping. It has just wore her out. She's wore out. She's so tired. Ran the cut, I'll take Hal over the quarterbacks we can realistically take in this draft 100%. I love it as an alternative option too, Rand. Talking about stretching for one of these quarterbacks in the draft or getting him 2 years of cheap club control, and I think still some upside there in his game at 23 years old. Hell yes. Ricardo says, I'm still hyped about Travis, but all these college quarterbacks are difficult to project. They run their offense mostly out of shotgun. Yeah, not a lot of traditionalists in this draft running up under center, play action. Spread-based concepts are the name of the game at the college level, and it's really just about how extreme of a spread system you run, how cultivated and how managed it is. You've got the Tennessee that runs one of the more scripted spread concepts, I think the most spread system concepts you'll find in the league. Then you have other ones where there's a little more opened up fluidity to it. Thomas says, if they draft Penix and Geno loses out to Hal or Penix, do you think Schneider would trade Geno by the trade deadline? Only if you had a contender that had a number one guy go down and they didn't want to lose their season, which you have a situation like, let's say last year, Thomas, the Minnesota Vikings have Kirk Cousins go down with his injury. And rather than them having to lean to a revolving door of quarterbacks for the rest of the year, they just go get Geno Smith you're not going to get much for him. You might get a 4th round pick at that point for him or something like that, but they just take him for a 4th round pick and John takes it in that direction of it. But now he says, I'll tell you right now, we're going to pound the rock 1,400 yards, 1,400 yard season for K9. I like it. Let's go, Benelli. Phillips says, Hall of Fame quarterback John Elway threw for 7 touchdowns and 14 interceptions in his first year. Interesting. Does that mean Elway was garbage too? Doesn't Elway have 2 or 3 Super Bowls? He does have 2, and he's been to freaking like 5 or 6 of them. And yeah, it's the part I don't get with this. It's what's happened, and this is what I think is going on in football right now from fans' perspective. I don't know if it's that there's this draw to be considered so smart in your evaluation of things that there seems to be at times this sort of jumping at the bit to be able to be the first to have a take on a player, to be able to call him, especially to call him trash, right? This guy's, see, he's trash. That's it. He's done. And I feel like there's sometimes from fans just sort of jump to want to get to that point because then you look really smart to say it. But it's like, it's easy to say it, but understanding in NFL history, be it a guy like Elway, be it a guy like Rodgers that sat for 3 years, Patrick Mahomes who sat for a year. If you're not, and the time it takes to develop, and the first year of starting and the interceptions, Peyton Manning with his 29 interceptions in his first year starting. It's just you've got to give them a little bit more of an understanding that sometimes that first year, that rough thing will happen. And, if anything, I almost look at it as more of not a negative thing for him, Philip, because I feel like in the willingness to throw those picks, it's like he got a very big lesson last year on the throws you can make and the throws you can't make, what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. And he had to be driven to do that by the necessity to the fact that his defense was giving up more points than anybody in all of football. So there was a necessity upon him and the offense to score every time. He's not going to be driven in that same way here with the Seahawks to have to provide those same kind of returns. But I think that there's some lessons you learn in those failures in that first year and playing that way. Versus, let's say, the quarterback who might go out there, Philip, and play it safe in that first year. He ends up having his attempts brought down to like 320 for the season, and he's just handing it off and throwing dump out routes the whole year. Did that guy learn a whole lot by doing that? Maybe he ends out the season at 13 touchdowns or 17 touchdowns and 8 interceptions or something, but did he really progress as a QB? Did he grow as a QB at that point? I'd offer maybe not. So I'm with you. I don't think that there's the stat of the interceptions is as a troubling one as is presented. Thomas says, what got me is how I got sacked 61 times to 65, Thomas. 65. It's a marvel that he threw for 3,900 yards and 21 touchdowns. It is. Yeah. He pulled that off with that. Mikey says, B, how much Seahawks clothes do you have? Every time I see you, it's another one. Well, the shirts get wore out, man. I wear these things so much that the old ones get like, I don't know what it is, but I wear these shirts out quick for whatever reason. So I have to always kind of keep gumming the new ones and stuff. So yeah, I end up buying a lot, that's for sure. But they're pretty cheap. They're like $20 shirts on Amazon, so it's not a big budget towards the shirt budget. But I got to keep the gear clean, man. Phillips says Howell will be a very solid quarterback. Schneider has faith in him, so we'll be calm to see. It'll be cool to see if he's something be special. Agreed. yeah, I think he's in a really good place right here for some success. Yalin says, Brandon, what do you think about the way the Commanders and DQ are going about building the new team? I feel it's a bit of the old ways, still trying to make it work. I think I tend to agree with you a little bit at first on the surface of this, in that again, where a team comes in and they go, know yourself, know where you are, know what you're in a position to do or not do. Doris Armstrong, 3 years, $33 million. Okay. You signed Dante Fowler. Okay. So you're bringing over your Cowboy crew with you. Tyler Biotish, center from the Cowboys, 3 years, $29.25 million. There's a little bit of these like kind of let's go for it moves right now. Bring in Bobby, bring in this guy, bring that, like kind of some aging crew, rather than kind of hitting a reset button. It's like, they're like, well, let's try to drive this forward a little bit. And that's as you're going to bring in a younger quarterback there. I'm not in favor of right now a lot of what I've seen, y'all, into your point with what the Commanders have done with Quinn being brought in. I feel like they ended up settling on Quinn. I don't think that was their first option. And Quinn brought in Cliff Kingsbury first as the offensive coordinator. These signings that they've decided to push out there, I don't know what kind of team they're exactly building there, Yalin. I don't see I know what our identity is going to be. I know what we're driving towards. I don't know what the Commanders are trying to drive towards as their identity. I know they're going to get their quarterback, but yeah, I don't see the method to their approach is clearly here. Thomas says, I think in 3 years, the McDonald will be spoken of the way Shanahan and McVay are, but defensively. I like that, Thomas. I could see it for sure, too. Dig Docs, Brandon, pre-draft prediction, which defensive player will shine the most under McDonald's defensive scheme? Oh, I think that Dotson has a really good chance of being the guy that takes off. I mean, Witherspoon, because you can just use him for you've got a guy in Mike McDonald's whose defense has a real preference for players that are Swiss Army knife players. And in Witherspoon, you have one of the ultimate Swiss Army knife type of players. He obviously really fits into this really well. But as far as new free agent additions, I think Dotson certainly is going to be a great Patrick Queen here for this defense and what he's going to be asked to do and fill out. Boye Mafe is going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities. And as we saw last year, when Uchenna was out there playing and Uchenna was pulling more of the double teams away, he was getting those single opportunities. He had 7 straight games with a sack. With the stacked fronts of this defense, you're going to provide a lot of your edges with one-on-one opportunities because of just the stack fronts and how that pulls the protection off of the double teams off the edges. So another guy that I think is going to really, really excel. And maybe even a guy like Tariq Woolen, because he's going to get more of an opportunity to play man-based concepts rather than just sitting back there in zone 24/7. More of an opportunity to actually jump routes and make plays and get picks and interceptions. Landon Glover, I really want Jackson Powers Johnson at 16 if he was there. It all went downhill when we traded Max. Sign me up, man. I like Jackson Powers. Good player. The only question there, Landon, is if he fits to the movement-based stuff you're looking for from the offensive lineman. The talent is definitely there with him, but at 330, he didn't necessarily move as well as you'd ideally want for this scheme from your offensive lineman, but he is so good and undoubtedly the best center in this draft. Copper-wise, I wonder if Howell would have had as many picks or sacks if the enemy didn't have him throwing 40 to 50 times a game. Probably wouldn't have had as many on that. Yeah, that definitely hurts when you're having your young quarterback throwing that much. It's you're flirting with danger. Brian says Howell is better than Bryce. Will be always. I could see it, man. I certainly think I would take Howell over Bryce myself, but me with Brian, I'm not a big Bryce guy at all. Yeah, Ricardo, I think that it's fair to say that. But part of this is also my own bias on Bryce Young, where you guys know where I was standing on Bryce coming out of last year's draft, where I just said, this is not going to work. Not at this size. He doesn't have enough mobility. He doesn't have a big enough arm to make this work. Hoyagrade B, if going from college offense to NFL offense is as easy as you make it sound, please clarify if I'm hearing it wrong. Why hasn't it worked on the NFL level? Why hasn't it worked at the NFL level? There's been college guys that have come up to the NFL level to run spread-based concepts. So it's definitely has. Has there been a direct guy that's gone from college to the NFL? Maybe not as much of that path, but as somebody else was saying, I mean, Miami with a lot of their concepts run a lot of stuff that straight comes from the spread stuff that you would find at the college level. So it is there at the NFL level as far as it being worked. Is it being done as far as a direct coach going from one spot to the next in that way? You have an offensive coordinator in college who directly goes as an offensive coordinator at the NFL level. I guess maybe not, but I mean, even like you had a Sarkisian guy going from college to the Falcons a couple of years ago. So, I mean, there has been the transition made there, but, I'll also say when it comes to NFL and hiring and being willing to take chances on these kind of hires, the NFL tends to be one that wants to try to play it safe, where guys don't tend to think it outside the box. I don't know if that's an example of there not being a way that it can work as much as it's just a example of the NFL's risk aversion when it comes to, taking chances on these kind of coaches. But I don't think I'm not trying to make it sound easy. I'm just saying there are spread-based stuff. There is spread-based stuff at the NFL level being utilized by teams. So I probably misspoke if that's how it was coming out. Samuel Carlson, I don't like what's been happening in the fan base the last 3 years. We are so quick to write off players and jump on the bandwagon that logical arguments no longer have a place in the conversation. The emotionality has definitely been driven in a way that I think has been unique in the past couple of years, Samuel, to your point. The Russell Wilson situation, the Pete Carroll situation, everything's been driven in a real, it's kind of a hard place to get to nuance at times, Samuel. And patience is not definitely something that is necessarily held in high regard on that. But yeah, there's a draw more than ever now for folks to come to quick evaluations on players. You've seen one game of him in the pros. Oh, I know what he is now. I deal with it a lot where I just go, yeah. Or how do you come to that quick of a conclusion? I've seen it. I know it. Y'all and Brandon, the hell debate is a hot one. I was asked, what's an example of a team moving off of a quarterback that went on to be better than expected? I used Goff, Cousins, Baker, Geno as examples. Any others? There's plenty of others. I mean, how about Brett Favre? Y'allin? Favre was in Atlanta for a year before he got offloaded to the Packers. Matt Hasselbeck went to us after being with the Packers. They had Favre. They didn't have, but he went and had a good pro career with us. I mean, if we sat here yelling and went through the last 25 years, we would find a lot of examples. Have all the guys went out and won Super Bowls? No. But have there been a lot of guys that have gone out there and got it done? Yeah. I mean, even guys that have won Super Bowls, yelling. You got, Trent Dilfer. Is he a game manager with the Ravens and win that Super Bowl? Sure. But did he go from the Buccaneers, which at the time no quarterback was going to, Buccaneers at the time were like the Bears, where it's like no quarterback's going there and being successful, but won a Super Bowl. Doug, I mean, I can just name just two freaking Buccaneer quarterbacks alone. Even Doug Williams, former number 1 overall pick by the Buccaneers, goes on and wins a Super Bowl coming in for the Washington Redskins in '89. Oh yeah, there's a lot of examples of it. A lot of examples. I did get Brandon. I was thinking of the word Swiss Army knife and Witherspoon. I hope all the other guys you named shine more too. Yeah, Witherspoon's going to be a nice fit in this defense. No doubt. Tucker with no Pete. John is signing a bunch of vets to fill roster spots. Pete was crazy about having a ton of UDFAs on the roster. I like UDFAs, but established vets at minimum salary will always produce more. I'm with it, Tucker. Yeah, I'm more of, especially because you can tend to get those guys at good value, those vets. First, the rookies who have so much learning to do and tend to have a lot of green areas to their games that you have to kind of work your way through a little bit. Thomas, I know, but thinking about it, I was Dan Quinn. I would have built up the O-line or grabbed Marvin Harrison Jr. or leveraged the pick to desperate teams so I can fill the team out. That's what I would have done, Thomas. I would have been more reset button with Washington at that point. The roster's not in a good state. You just dumped your 2 edges last year. off of your defense. Your first round pick from last year was okay. Like you say, the offensive line's not in good shape. I would have packaged the picks together and looked to move back if I was Washington at that point. They would have been able to get that grandfather kind of haul in there at that point. Why not go that route? But they're doing more of a kind of that middle round. It's that middle road. I always say, don't take the middle road. Choose a lane. Don't go down the center of the median. And I feel like Washington just a little bit's going down the center of the median a little bit this offseason. Regardless, he does love finding UDFA feel-good stories. Yeah, he does. Brad Johnson, there's another one. Wasn't with that team the first run through. Eventually went to that team, got himself a Super Bowl. Nick Foles, Nick Foles kind of went on that crazy magical run, but wasn't his first party. Fitzpatrick, there's another one. Thomas says, I just hate it if you're not with us, you're against us fan. It's like I haven't been a fan since 84. Heck, I remember Seattle playing the AFC West, watching Rick Meyer and Cortez. Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, that's kind of the nature. I think it's the hard part, of getting in discussions I find at times, and where I try to find myself a little bit more of I understand your perspective even by disagreement, try to find that, look, where you're coming from has some validity to it, even if I don't agree with it, where we don't have to drive to that state of, like you say, it's that if you're with me or against me sort of mentality in modern age that's so hard to get around because it applies to everything. Anything we talk about now always seems to have that sort of creeping into the surface of things. And it gets tough because it gets hard to have conversations when everything's always sort of itching that trigger for it to be driven to one way or the other with it. But it is a bit of the nature of the modern beast, and also something that we have to, I think, always be cognizant of when we have these conversations in this chat, Thomas, because there is a pull to get there at times. And so we got to always fight that pull, myself included, because it just does exist there for whatever reason in this modern era. It seems to be more there than ever before. We got Rich Gannon. There's another one, Thomas. Got to a Super Bowl with not his original team, too. Well, Young Grenade, I saw a tweet a while back that suspected Fitzmagic was going to become the Hawks quarterback coach. Boy, if he did, that would have been awesome. He's got that, Yale background, so maybe a pretty smart guy to be able to teach the crew how to make it happen, make it go, and make it work. So definitely possible. Boy, Hand Grenade says, poor commies got the scraps of the NFL coaching. Yeah, they're getting the scraps of just about everything. They're getting a lot of scraps. Steve Young, there's another one. Steve Young, another Buccaneer draftee. A lot of Buccaneer quarterbacks that eventually got drafted, went on and won a Super Bowl somewhere else. Good thing they got a couple of Super Bowl wins on their register, including both of theirs. What's weird about that the irony there is that the two Super Bowl wins that the Buccaneers have, if I'm not mistaken, are with two quarterbacks that weren't on their original roster, that they didn't originally pick. So their original ones they picked won Super Bowls at other places, but then when they win their two Super Bowls, it's with quarterbacks from other places. You guys get that? You guys get that? Feed Me thinks the Bears are making the playoffs next season, huh? With a rookie, Caleb Williams, huh? Feed Me all in. John Brandon, thank you for subscribing to the channel. BD Disco, welcome aboard the Hawks Nest as well. Let's go ahead and kind of put a little bit of a button here as we start to put a little bit of an end to this one on the show today. Get the last couple of questions on in. I'll be back for a members-only show tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So if you're a member of the channel, take a look at your community post as I've posted the link there to tomorrow's show. We'll also be doing the B&B show tomorrow at 7 o'clock. So a couple shows coming up tomorrow on the docket, along with we will be, of course, back on Sunday. I think we'll go mock draft crazy on Sunday. We'll go down to Mocktown, deep down into Mocktown. Yalin says, to clarify, the discussion was more about quarterbacks labeled as bad who then went on to be good. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that certainly the list would get pared down a little bit more at that point. But I do think we could still find some examples there beyond just those ones you had mentioned. I think the important part about it, y'all, and at the forefront of this is the understanding of how the NFL evaluates the quarterback position, and then what's going on in the NFL as far as front offices go in their development of young quarterbacks. Is it a healthy environment that fosters for these guys to grow in a way that they used to 25, 30 years ago? Or is it one of snapping fingers saying, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? And I feel like we have a lot of general managers that are like the kids in the car trip in the back seat asking mom and dad if we're there yet. And that there's more of a requirement with quarterbacks, because it is such a hard position to play, to give them that extra time to become the possible player that they could become. And that's the part that I think is driving more to quarterbacks being thrown out prematurely before we really know what they are and who they are and how good they are. Justin Fields is an example of this recently. Who knows what Justin Fields is for sure? Wasn't put in a good enough environment to feel like you could really make, I think, an accurate assessment of him. Jamie Cruz, why do I feel like we dodged a bullet with the Wilson and Fields drama? We got very lucky. If you see that way, Howell was an amazing pick. Yeah, I agree. I think it's neither of those two items would have been good for us to go down those roads with. And boy, we're hearing even rumors with Wilson at this point, Jimmy Cruz, where if he doesn't play well in training camp, he might just flat out be cut. So I don't know if those rumors are true, but it does feel like a little bit of a drama-filled situation out there with those two as it stands right now. But we'll see with Fields. We'll see what he is and where he goes. And I feel very good to your point like that. A lot better about the Howe situation being here versus that. A much, much better alternative. Voodoo, are you playing any fantasy football next year? I will be playing fantasy football in probably the Hawks Nest League next year. I did okay this last year back into the fray, but yeah, I'll probably jump back into it. I'll probably do a little bit. He says, I've seen the Wilson workout video. He is the most weirdest person I've ever seen in my life, for real. He's definitely, he marches to his own beat. That's for sure. I think the Bears might be okay. I think Caleb coming out in year one and expect him to be really good year one. He's got some things to clean up in his game. He's been playing off script for a very good amount of time. And first thing he's going to be starting to do with the NFL is learn to play on script at times. And I think it might take him a year to kind of get acclimated in that way. But it wouldn't shock me if they were decent too. Waldron there doesn't, Thomas, you're right. Waldron is also there, doesn't exactly build a lot of confidence for me with Caleb. Ricardo says if Waldron and Caleb are in the playoffs, that would be proof that Pete was sabotaging him. I think you probably very, very much that points in that direction, doesn't it, Ricardo? Just a bit. Yalin says, I don't think the NFL has a developmental program like they used to. There's a lot of rules to keep players out of the building and a lack of desire to work with guys who aren't QB1. Agreed, Yalin. That's why I've always said that I think that an alternative league for the NFL would be so good for them in helping to develop the product better of the main, flagship product being the NFL. If you had one of these developmental leagues that was able to move along and give these quarterbacks that opportunity to be able to round out their skill set, because it is such a very difficult position to play. There are so many skills you need to have to make it go right. And I think that it's gone in a way, I think you sound like you agree here, Yalin, where the development program has shifted away in years more and more and more away from allowing that development to take hold, allowing those guys to grow, not just essentially throwing them away when it didn't first work. If we went and made a Matt Hasselbeck trade like we did 25 years ago, and Holmgren brought that guy in, and he comes out there and Holmgren thinks he's ready to start, and Matt gets on the field and he's not ready to start. He's not on the same page with Mike Holmgren. He's really having a rough time of it. You've having to go back to Trent Dilfer. And in this modern age, that Hasselbeck guy now would be just, okay, bad, didn't work. It was his time. That was his shot. That was his shot. That was his chance. Get him out of here. But what happened with Hasselbeck? Dilfer went out there, played a little bit. Dilfer got the injury. Hasselbeck got another chance to come out there, learn from some of those lessons, and then found some success. And I think that that's the development that's got to be allowed to the position a little bit. But as you say, Yalin, it doesn't exist in the NFL as far as within coaching staffs really as a developmental program. It's not there within the front offices and their outlook of it, right? How many times, Yalin, do they say, we're going to take this quarterback, and on draft day, you see the general manager standing there in front of the microphones and he says, all right, we're going to give this guy, the time he needs to learn and, sit. This is not the type of guy that we need to be starting day one. We got to give him his chance to just kind of, learn the position. And then you get to week 3 and they're like, so he'll be starting next week. You go, what would have happened to your whole press conference on draft day? It's like, yeah, I might get fired if I don't start him. So I'm starting him. Okay. Phillips says something like the G League for NBA. Yeah, we've got those, and we've got the two football leagues that have now combined up here, Philip, this offseason, which maybe they're going to be able to supply that now. And if they could, that's going to be so helpful for the NFL because as Yalin said above, the players associations have pushed so much for a lack of practice time, a lack of development time, and it is creating a lack of refined skills on the football field that we're seeing from players. They're not as ready and able to play. They may be more athletic than ever. They may be faster than ever, but they're not as fundamentally good as they once were because of the fact that they don't practice as much as they once did. Samuel Carlson, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that, Samuel. What the heck is up with JJ's stock? I don't wee it. I think you meant don't see it. But you also meant like I don't wee it, like you pee on the draft stock assessments of JJ, which also does kind of work in my opinion too. This is one of the conundrums for me too, Samuel. It's a meme on this channel. It's a meme every year. I don't plan on it. I don't pick one particular quarterback out and say, this will be my guy this year that I'm going to kind of crap on. But there's always one quarterback in every single draft that's rising up boards or people are hot to trot for that I just should sit there and shake my head and I go, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. JJ McCarthy stock is going up on the forefront at times for reasons that don't always have to do directly with what he's doing on the football field. You just talk to the guy, he's got a way of talking. Oh, you just talk to the guy, he's got a charisma to it. Oh, he's got that leadership vibe thing he got. Oh, he's kind of a winner. He's a winner. These kind of things that they both mean something and mean nothing at the same time. And when it comes to me with looking at the quarterback play, it's not that those things don't matter. It's just that when we're talking about those things and I look at quarterbacks in my history, Samuel, that people start leading with those things is what they talk about. It tends to be because they don't want to talk about the skill set of what actually exists there on the football field. And a lot of what you do with you get to him on the football field is it's extrapolation. It's, well, look at his third down and long conversion rates. Well, how often was that Michigan offense running on first and second down and a lot of third and longs? Right? There comes this, like a lot of these stats that people present to with him come down to sort of sample size versus other quarterbacks that have had a much more high volume of amount of throws of those type of throws, which I think is where you could kind of characterize why he looks a little bit better in some of those set categories. I don't see it from an arm strength standpoint. I don't see it from a processing standpoint. He was really restricted in that offense and what he was asked to do. I do believe that there is something in that. I'm not in this whole camp of, well, that's just Harbaugh. He wants to run the ball, and so he's just not going to ask his QB to throw. No, I think that there's times that they were actively protecting that kid. And I'm going to stand by my assessment on this one, Samuel, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm not going to move him up my draft boards. I'm not going to make him a first-round prospect. As I believe I've been right before on a variety of these quarterbacks in recent years, I think I'm going to be right on this kid too. And I just don't get it. I don't get why he's risen up. He's slight. He doesn't have a very big arm. He's not as mobile as some people are trying to sell him as being. It's another one of these QBs that's just rising when he really should not be rising this high. Not a bad quarterback, but just not a top-end first-round guy that he should be looked at in that range. But thank you, Samuel. I appreciate it, and I see it the same way you do. Yalin says, do you think Zach Wilson has hit his ceiling, though? He's had about as many chances as you can. Yeah, but that's also a guy that with coming out of the draft was not a guy that I was altogether that high on. You've got first questions about level of competition. Then you've got to look at that BYU program, Yalin, and take that into account. And like, how often is he getting hit? How often is he really under duress? He's got a lot of linemen that are good quality across the board. He had NFL linemen drafted off that line. He had guys that had been on mission that were 25, 26 years old at times. If I've got an offensive tackle that's 25, 26 and been in an NFL weight room versus a 20-year-old kid out there at a different college in California going against him, like the other guy's going to be physically more able to go. Zach was a guy that did a lot of his stuff in college off script. He wasn't a processor on the football field. And when you looked at him doing the off script stuff, it's the same thing that I apply to JJ McCarthy a little bit, is that you got to have the good mobility and able to get away from guys. You've got to have that little twitch ability to get away from guys. The young Russell Wilson, the Lamar Jackson type. And Wilson just didn't have that. And neither does JJ for that matter. But I thought Wilson just got tremendously overrated on that point. And I wasn't really high on his talent coming out necessarily, y'all. I don't think his tape was that great coming out of BYU, and that line kept him so clean in a way that you knew NFL lines were not going to be able to make him that clean at the NFL level or anything close to it. So extrapolating that from the tape in that way was part of what I think led them a bit astray on that one. Fleece Jonathan Hankins, is he good? He's on the downside of his career with this Fleece the Mac. Recent years, it hasn't been too good at this point. Nick says, look at Gino. It wasn't for this organization. He could arguably not be in the league today. Instead, he's a back-to-back Pro Bowler, and he's made $60 million the past 2 years. Well said, Nick. Amen. Yeah. Second chances can be a good thing in this league, especially with all the teams who want to throw these QBs away so prematurely. And yeah, recently Hankins has just not been playing as well. He's getting along in the tooth. He's been around since 2013, so it's just kind of probably starting to wind down a little bit at this point. Phoebe says, I blame Jim Harbaugh for calling JJ a first rounder. Ricardo, who's better, Newton or Murphy? I could see us taking one of those. Well, I mean, this is the point where it becomes kind of hard, Ricardo, at this spot to make the determination between those two. As you can see here on my horizontal board, when you look at the defensive tackle, I have them both rated in the second round. I have them both right next to each other. So, I mean, you're talking about they're at basically the same pick. They're basically at the same value point and structure of player. Would I take Newton before I would take Murphy? Yes. But are they both right about the same area as the bottom line, and it's really negligible, the difference between the two? Yeah. Fleece says, do you think Jody Allen's going to fire John if he screws this all up? I think he's got 3 years to get this done, Fleece. I don't think that there's a big get this done now by next year or within the next 2 years or you're out of here, sucker. I think that he's going to have some time to get this right. Philip, seen a lot of BYU quarterbacks come to the NFL and get mauled. Yeah, we have, haven't we? Absolutely, we've had. Certainly happened to Jim McMahon, too, back in the day. Yeah, you go from being in college there where you've got an offensive line, and for a lot of years, BYU had spread concepts, so the quarterbacks were just used to getting the ball out of their hands. But as I said, you have, because of the mission situation there in BYU that is very, very, very unique, and because you have like the Tongan experience side of that and their mission, you get these guys that have a couple extra years, you get aligned with guys that are 24, 25, 26, or whatever it is at times. They've got some built-in advantages in what they're going to be able to do from a standpoint of helping out their QBs, because it's directly related to that. I've got guys 3 or 4 years more advanced of age. It's going to set me out, but I wouldn't trust BYU QBs at the next level at all at this point. I don't think we've had any real, I mean, I know Steve Young was all right, McMahon was all right, but it is one where, like, just again, going back to it on the Wilson one in retrospect, and this is why I'm so hard on the JJ McCarthy one, is the Wilson one in respect looks like, well, yeah, duh. He wasn't that good enough to be taken in that spot, but the same stuff in that same way, talking a little bit about JJ McCarthy, was the same kind of being placed upon there with Wilson a bit, and I just feel they're the same games being played a bit there. Mr. Kane, how you doing? Says JJ McCarthy should be the first quarterback taken in the draft. Better quarterback than Joe Montana. Laugh my ass off. I'm completely joking. I haven't really looked at any of the quarterbacks this year. And we are just kind of wrapping up, folks. I know I said about 20 minutes ago we'd wrap it up, but I got to put a wrap up on this one. I'm gonna pop over to my Twitch channel. So if you guys want to still keep talking football, if you guys are looking to keep this discussion still going on through the night, as I've said, probably pretty smart to go ahead and sub on up to my Twitch channel, the Seahawks Nest. I'm going to be doing a lot of streaming of gaming over there And I know with a lot of you guys going the 4, 5, 6, 7 hours on the live stream stuff, you can get me over there a little at times now to where I'll be streaming over there a lot more. So that if you want to guys keep going on with these discussions super, super long in the night, we can be going over and doing it over there. But we're going to be kind of flipping it up and doing some more of that over that side of it. So do get subbed to me over there. If you guys want to kind of keep this going on through over on that side, I'll probably be back on about another 10, 15 minutes over on that side of it here. Deadshot Killer, I love hearing the cat. She's definitely in the I need to be pet now. You've been streaming for a long time. It's my time to get some attention mode. Very much, aren't you? She's got a lot to say, she does. A lot to say. Nick says drugged up Manziel, who didn't know the playbook, somehow was better than Zach Wilson and Kenny Pickett. Yeah. Another guy where it's again comes down to like pre-draft evaluation. To me, there's one thing of you pre-draft evaluate a guy who's really good talent and deserves to be a guy who's given a shot at an NFL franchise level, who can go out there and maybe be your starter of the future. It's another thing when you F up your pre-draft evaluation of a quarterback and determine a guy is that talented of a guy and he's not that good, and then you're riding with him for 3 years onto the future. I will say, I think there's a distinct difference between these two concepts we're talking about here. And when it comes to a Manziel, when it comes to a Pickett, when it comes to a Zach Wilson, this is about bad evaluations back in college, not about the organizations messing up their development of that player or prematurely bailing off that player before they've made the ultimate determination on whether or not those guys are good enough. And I think that there's definitely it gets hard to maybe discern those two a little bit because it's easy for those things to kind of stick together, I think, a bit. But that's the place where I make a differentiation on that. Sam Howell had 10,000 yards passing coming out of UNC. His final year of college had a whole new offense changed up for him, had 4 skill position players taken at the NFL level. Then the very next year from when he was going to come back to college. So he had an empty cupboard as far as his skill position players to work with. You know, you can understand why there was that little bit of dip. You wouldn't have had him coming out of college going, oh, we had so much to work with. He was no, you go, okay, well, there's an understandable point of why there was a little bit of a dip in that final year. And it wasn't like he fell off a cliff like Levis did. So that's where it's like you don't do the one-size-fits-all application every QB on this being, well, he failed at that first stop, so therefore that team just prematurely bailed on him, and so he must be worthy of this second opportunity here. Every individual situation is different. Every evaluation is different for a given player. Mr. Keynes is going to be rough as heck for Caleb. It might be. I tell you what, Mr. Kane, he's going to have a lot better situation set up for him than Fields did there, at the very least as far as that offensive line, and probably also as the skill position player too. Nick Guzman says, Brandon, can you drop a link from the Twitch channel here in the stream? For sure, man. Kitty. Okay. There we go. So we got a link in there, and I'll be back over on the channel here in just probably about 10 minutes or so. So we're going to wrap this on up here a little bit right now. Fleece, I don't think Nick Harris is going to start center. I think he'll eventually be the backup in Olo team. I know he's being tried to guard, but he'll go to the center role when it's all said and done. Carter says, to be fair, I didn't think Kyler or Murray either, and he made it. Kind of made it. Kind of. I think there's more to be determined on Kyler on that. I think that's still a TBD on that one. Especially when it comes to actually paying Tyler money. Ricardo never liked Manziel, just didn't look like an NFL player. No, he didn't. He was always looking thin. Wiry thin. And basically his college tape was him throwing it up to Mike Evans 24/7. So it's like, how's that going to translate to the NFL level, you know? You run around in the pocket. You're not 4.5. You're more 4.7. You're trying to dance back there like Russell Wilson and then throw it up to Mike to just go up there and high point everything. Evans' college tape is ridiculous. Pobe Malabranche says, what's your cat's name? This would be Pumpkin. There's Pumpkin. Nick Guzman, thank you for subbing to the channel over there, my man. We'll be bouncing over onto that side. Mr. Kane, you have yourself a great night. Sleep well, brother. Sleep well. Well, we're going to put a button on that one, folks. At that point, I will be bouncing over to the Twitch side of things, as we'll be doing some more streaming on that side of it. I'll be back tomorrow with a couple shows for the members at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and then 7 o'clock, the B&B show, no doubt about that. So we will be bouncing between those things. If you guys want to keep the discussion on, we'll be bouncing on over there to the Twitch channel. Didn't the whole offensive line for Manziel make the NFL as well? I think that sounds about right. I mean, we had Jermaine Ifedi. We took one of them, I think, Nick. And yeah, there was a couple of them that also made it the offense, that made it to the NFL from that line. So yeah, he had a lot to work with. Another evaluation that was fairly easy to kind of look at and go, that's not going to work. Manziel's that's not going to work at the pro level. It was wild. It was wild. Anthony, I salute you too, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys on the great stream tonight, as ever. Always awesome discussion, always lively, always intelligent, smart, keeps me laughing as well in addition to it all. So thank you guys for, as ever, more. Just a great stream, great discussion on this, and let's keep this going through the offseason. It's been a solid offseason. It's not a lot of bright lights, big city. It's not a lot of fireworks going off, but solid, smart decision-making, a patient approach, and the long-term future for this team is looking healthy and very, very strong. Something to feel very, very good about. I will be back here soon. Over to the Twitch channel right now. Join me over there. We'll be back in about 10 minutes over on that side of that. Thank you for you guys watching. Thank you to everybody for all the donations. Samuel Carlson, Jamie Cruz with a $50 donation. Megan Gock-Roger with a $100 donation drop. Randall McDaniel, John, Notorious. Thank you to all of you, Talon Deal as well, for all the support to the channel, all my members of the channel and my patrons as well. You guys are very, very kind in all your support and amazing in your support at that as well. So I thank you guys. Much love out to you guys as ever. Back very soon. But until that time, I hope I don't have to remind you. Still, you know what? I'm probably going to do so anyway. Please, by God, do not you ever forget. Go Hawks.